États-Unis, qui s'est déroulé il y a 2 semaines à Phoenix, n'a pas été favorable aux Ferrari. Alain Prost et Nigel Mansell ont tous deux abandonné alors qu'au terme des essais intersaison, on les donnait pour favoris. Que s'est-il réellement passé à Phoenix? Automoto fait le point avec Alain Prost.
C'était ni l'un ni l'autre. Bon, directement, c'est la boîte, bien entendu, puisque le problème que j'ai eu, on l'a eu pendant les essais à Phoenix. C'est le petit réservoir d'huile qui, depuis cette année, est à l'intérieur de la boîte de vitesse, qui fuyait. Et l'huile se répandait notamment sur l'embrayage. Donc, j'avais un problème de pression au niveau de la boîte de vitesse et aussi un embrayage qui patinait. Alors que Nigel, c'est uniquement l'embrayage. Il a cassé l'embrayage à 3/4 de la course. Et bon, c'est un problème qu'on a pu résoudre très très facilement. Le réservoir d'huile, c'est simplement le fait qu'il était mal fait. Donc, en l'espace d'une demi-journée, on peut faire un petit réservoir d'huile qui ne fuit pas. C'est malheureusement bénin, mais avec des circonstances assez graves. Quant à l'embrayage, simplement, on a un support d'embrayage qui est un peu plus épais, un millimètre aussi plus large pour éviter qu'il se casse. Bon, ça, c'est rien du tout et ça ne remet rien en cause au niveau des performances.
Ici, à Interlagos, on a beaucoup parlé de la rupture du moteur de Prost. Un moteur de qualification qu'il n'a donc pas pu utiliser. Que s'est-il passé? Le motoriste de Prost a vérifié la chambre de combustion d'un cylindre au moyen d'un outil spécial dont une partie est tombée au fond du cylindre. Ce même motoriste ne s'en est pas rendu compte. En donnant un coup de démarreur pour vérifier les compressions, il a tordu une soupape. Résultat, un moteur cassé, un incident classique. Dans quelques heures, les McLaren-Honda prendront le départ du Grand Prix du Brésil sur la première ligne de la grille du nouveau circuit d'Interlagos près de São Paulo. En pole position, le Brésilien Ayrton Senna. Est-ce une surprise? Évidemment non. Premièrement, Senna est un poliste, c'est-à-dire un natif de São Paulo, et doué d'une forte fibre patriotique. Il avait à cœur de briller devant les quelques 50 000 spectateurs ayant assisté à cette dernière journée d'essai. Deuxièmement, Senna n'a jamais usurpé son surnom, le roi de la pole position, c'est lui et bien lui, et des pole positions, il en a signé 43, le record absolu, en comptant celle d'hier à Interlagos. Ayant connu cette petite alerte samedi matin, Senna a redressé la barre samedi après-midi en produisant une prestation magnifique. La piste était surchauffée, très glissante, ils furent 8 et 8 seulement à améliorer leur performance de la veille. Parmi ces 8, il y avait Senna. Derrière Senna et derrière Berger, Boutsen et Patrese ont également fait mieux que la veille. À près d'une seconde de Senna cependant, Boutsen prendra le départ à la corde de la deuxième ligne. Une performance de valeur, eu égard aux conditions de piste et aux obstacles à éviter. Gugelmin par exemple. De plus, et si la piste était glissante comme nous l'avons dit précédemment, c'est parce que la Williams de Patrese avait été victime d'une fuite d'huile. Alors, en la circonstance, bravo Boutsen et bravo Patrese. A l'inverse des Williams, les Ferrari n'ont pas amélioré samedi après-midi. Explication d'Alain Prost et de Nigel Mansell, incompatibilité des réglages de la voiture avec les pneus de qualification. En revanche, samedi matin, le champion du monde en titre estimait avoir une voiture parfaite pour la course. Jean Alesi et sa Tyrrell, meilleur dans le classement des moteurs V8 derrière les V10 et les V12, Jean Alesi se place en 7e position. Alliot est 10e, Bernard 11e, Grouillard 21e et Dalmas 26e. Voilà pour les Français. Rendez-vous ce soir pour la retransmission complète du Grand Prix du Brésil sur TF1 bien sûr. En attendant, avec Ricardo Patrese au volant, voici la grille de départ.
Skyscrapers of São Paulo's commercial district, which belie the poverty which infests this city. Inflation runs at 1,000%. In the days before the race, mobs had looted supermarkets. Nevertheless, the Interlagos circuit had been completed in record time, and the grandstands would be full of fans willing to spend a month's salary on admission. Almost all of them had one hero in mind when they passed through the turnstiles. Only a Senna victory would take their minds off the problems outside. On the first day of practice, he set out to reward their faith. He unleashed one of his familiar flying laps to take provisional pole position. Although earlier in the day, the local hero proved that he too is human by spinning off into the São Paulo mud. Gerhard Berger, still smarting from his embarrassing exit in Phoenix, was the first to take the lap times into the 1:17s. He had high hopes of 2 poles in a row.
Terry Boutsen had been third in America, and although no one could beat the McLaren pair's Friday times, he took third on the grid, but decided the track was tough.
It's a very difficult track because it's got some slow corners which are followed by fast corners. And these fast corners are all very bumpy, so it means you are in the middle of this faster corner with lots of bumps, and you have to change gear in the middle of it, so you can't hold the steering only with one hand, change gear with the other hand, and you're shaking left and right in the car with the head going left and right, so it's very tiring for the drivers.
An advantage for the Ferrari gearbox, perhaps?
I would think so, yeah, a big advantage for them here, yeah. But they've got still the reliability problem, so you know, one of the two, I think the driver is still more reliable than the mechanical part of their car, so if we can make our car to finish the race, I think we'll be in good position.
Boutsen's teammate Riccardo Patrese claimed the other place on the second row, and Nigel Mansell recovered from this spin to head up an all-Ferrari third row. The automatic gearbox was proving a boon on this tight and twisting track, but Mansell was already being diplomatic about his new teammate.
I don't think it's bad. I still got utmost respect for him as a driver. What I will say is that perhaps some of the information doesn't come flowing out, because basically we're teammates, and he's got to try and beat me as I've got to try and beat him. So from that point of view alone, it's probably disappointing. He always wants to know what I'm doing, but very reluctant to tell me what he's doing.
The Frenchman had been little more than 1/10 of a second slower than his teammate. And another Frenchman eager to follow in his footsteps was right behind him in 7th place, John Alain heading up the 4th row in the Tyrrell. He was in humble mood when asked about his driving style.
I try to be the best, but I think I need to learn a lot, because it's just my first year, my full first year in Formula 1. Last year I did 8 races, so it's not enough to be a world champion.
FISA President Jean-Marie Balestre's role in judging the dispute between Prost and Senna at the end of last season was lampooned by the cartoonists in the crowd, and security around the man himself was formidable as he defied the boos and whistles to walk the pit lane as if there'd been nothing controversial about the conclusion of the 1989 championship.
Race, if you're really interested and into it, to be able to stay at home, I think is important, and I hope that I shall use Eurosport on quite a few occasions.
Hello Sterling, hello race fans across Europe. You've joined us for our flag-to-flag live coverage of the Brazilian Grand Prix. I'm Andrew Marriott, my co-commentator, Grand Prix winner John Watson. The burning question, can Ayrton Senna win his home Grand Prix at his 7th attempt in front of a huge São Paulo crowd? But first, let's look at the championship standings. There they are. Senna has 9, Alessi has 6, Boutsen 4, Piquet 3, Modena 2, Nakajima 1. That's after the race in Phoenix 2 weeks ago. Coming up next, the constructors table. McLaren at the top, we've seen them there so many times, 9 points. Tyrrell have 7, they got 2 cars in the top 6 last time out. Williams have 4, Benetton 3, and Brabham, they have 2. Well, Ayrton Senna is off the pole position. We're going to have a look at one of his very quick qualifying laps in just a minute. And here it is. Total commitment from Ayrton Senna. John Watson, talk us through it.
What Ayrton Senna does in these qualifying laps really is quite remarkable. In all the time I've been involved in Grand Prix racing, I've seen people make pole position laps maybe once or twice in a season. What Senna has done in his Grand Prix career is absolutely remarkable, and to be able to get into a Grand Prix car, to go out, to know what you have to do and just commit to it. Look at the way he's right on the limit, and he's like that in every corner.
Kicking up the dust, John, and there is a query about his neck, of course.
Yes, on the Friday practice he went over a bump. I think we're going to see the very bump, in fact, very shortly. And he got a nasty sort of crick in his neck. But with the team physiotherapists, they will have been looking at that very, very quickly indeed, and I'm sure there's no problem. Here we are, we're coming up to the part of the circuit. That's the bump. That's the bump that I think gave Ayrton the jar. But I think he'll be very, very well looked after since Friday up to the race this afternoon.
Yes, well, John, if he wins this one, there'll certainly be sambering in the streets of Sao Paulo tonight. He is, of course, a Sao Paulo boy. He's never actually raced a car on this racetrack. He's only raced karts here, and there's a separate kart track at this rebuilt circuit. That was his pole time from Friday, which he improved on slightly with a banzai last second lap on the Saturday qualifying session. The very last lap of qualifying, he went just that little bit quicker. And there you see the lakes, which the circuit is named after, Interlagos. They're a bit muddy at the moment. They used to be blue back in the days when you were racing there, John.
I wouldn't want to be in them whether they're muddy or blue. They look terrible.
Yes, and a little close to the track. But let's look at that grid. The grid lineup coming up. There you see, that's Senna's pole time, 17.277. Gerhard Berger making it all McLaren front row. Gerhard on the front row of the grid, both of the first two races of the season. All Williams second row, Boutsen and Patrese. The third row, Mansell and Prost both in the Ferraris and going quick in morning warm-up. Then Jean Alesi in the Tyrrell, the best of the V8s. Martini, De Cesaris. Alio 10th, that's a good performance from the Ligier driver. Eric Bernard 11th, a young driver going places, and another. Stefano Modena in the Brabham. Nelson Piquet down in 13th. Martin Donnelly, good performance for 14th. Nannini 15th. Morbidelli making his Grand Prix debut 16th. Paolo Barilla, the Pasta King. Then it's Aguri Suzuki. Satoru Nakajima behind the other Japanese. Larini, Gruyard. Alboreto and the Arrows, he's got a camera on his car. Derek Warwick, Alex Caffey, and Dalmas right on the bottom of the list. Look at the people who didn't qualify. Johansson and Leto, Onyx in trouble. And the Leighton House is in deep, deep trouble. Capelli and Gugelmin. And Gugelmin finished third last year. Now let's catch up with the latest news. Here's a man rarely out of it, the president of FISA, Jean-Marie Balestre, who apparently rose from his sickbed to make a last-minute trip to Sao Paulo. In a Saturday press conference, there was the usual rhetoric and fist-waving, and an admittance that he took a perverse pleasure in shouting at the hostile crowd. Everywhere he goes in Sao Paulo, he is protected by bodyguards. Back to the sporting side, and Saturday's practice and qualifying was generally slower than Friday's thanks to rising temperatures. Senna was the man setting the hot pace, but he did have one momentary lapse during the morning session. There is Senna getting ready for that lap, and now we see him on it. Just watch this one. There he spins off. Seemingly harmless spin, but he finished up in the mud, and he had to be towed out of that one. Nigel Mansell, another man that needed a tow. And as we said, what a difference a year makes. Last year in Rio, Mauricio Gugelmin finished third. This year, he is a non-qualifier with the Leighton House team. Thierry Boutsen can never be underestimated, and the Williams squad have had very few problems during practice. There's a camera on his car today. And Jean Alesi has continued to show his Phoenix form. His Tyrrell improved Saturday, and he starts the best Pirelli and best V8 starter. Little Pierluigi Martini from Ravenna in Italy continues to shine. Camel Team Lotus have been beset with problems, but in this morning's warm-up, there was some consolation. Derek Warwick continues to maintain that the car and the Lamborghini engine has tremendous potential, and Martin Donnelly, who failed to get off the grid in Phoenix, continues to impress. But with so little testing behind them, the team, headed by veteran Tony Rudd, will be happy to finish in the top 6 today. Well, the man who gave Lotus their first Grand Prix win, Sterling Moss, is still in the news. Sterling broke his leg last weekend, crashed his moped. We talked to him in his hospital bed.
I think that Formula One racing today is very, very exciting. I enjoy the events I see. I watch all of those that I can. I think it's extremely competitive. I personally believe that Senna is still the man to beat. I have a great respect for Senna because I don't know him that well. He's not an easy person to get to know and communicate with. But I have a great respect for him, I think, because he's a real racer. When Senna has a go, boy, he really does move. I mean, so does Nigel. He's quick. Berger's quick. Prost is quick. But to me, at the moment, Senna has the edge. I think obviously McLaren at the moment are, you know, the car, and we've seen lots of others come up, but I think they're unbeatable. But while they're in the position they're in, it's rather like us driving for Mercedes. When you drove for Mercedes, people weren't considering winning. They were trying to be first non-Mercedes, which is an awful attitude for people to have, and it takes a tremendously strong character. You can get up and say, well, I'm not, you know, I want to win and so on, but it takes a great character who really believes he can beat the power of that time of Mercedes, and of course we had Fangio. But a man who can get up and think he thinks he can actually beat McLaren, Honda and Senna together, and feels it and doesn't just say it, is quite a person, and I think that's going to take quite a guy to do it, because he's got to have the ability as well. I think Nigel can do it, but can the car do it yet? At the moment, one has to doubt that. So I think it'll be exciting. I think we're going to see better racing, because I think there is a doubt now. There's a slight crack. We hope that maybe this will come forth, and let's just hope that Balestre and people don't argue and let us get on with such a wonderful sport.
Some very sage comments there from Sterling Moss. Sterling, get well soon. Hope that thigh repairs quicker than you hope. I know you're wanting to do the Pirelli Marathon in June, so Sterling, a speedy recovery from you. Well, let's look at the Interlagos circuit now on the map just coming up. There it is, this rebuilt circuit. Originally it was 5 miles, now it's 2.5. Some original sections, some of the old sections we actually go backwards on. John Watson, perhaps you'd just like to take us through it.
Yes, we're entering the Senna curves, third gear dropping downhill into the Curve du Sol, then the back straight, sixth gear in about 180 miles an hour, then braking, taking fourth gear, turning left, turning right, left, right, up the hill again, braking again, back into fourth gear and accelerating into the slowest part of the track. Is back to first gear, then quickly second, third, back to first, then up third, fourth, back over that nasty bump, then up the hill again. This is now the fastest part of the circuit. The McLarens and the Ferraris in qualifying and practice were doing 190 miles an hour.
Yeah, I think, John, we're going to see it in car now, recorded on Friday. Yes, we're with Michele Alboreto. Just take us through the gear changes.
Well, Alboreto's just taken fifth gears on the back straight, now into sixth gear, and in the arrows he'll be probably doing 180 miles an hour, just under. Back down into fourth gear for this very quick left-hand corner. This going between the two lakes. The drivers were a bit concerned about the lakes being close to the circuit. If they had a problem, they felt that it's possible that a car could actually get over the barriers and get into that lake, which would be very, very, very unfortunate for that particular driver.
Yeah, people have been in the water in Monaco, but that would be a bit different. Looks a bit muddy, that lot.
Well, it's very muddy, but of course I don't know whether they've got anybody there on the lake to provide a safety. They've got a boat and an aqualand scuba diver.
There is the arrows accelerating up the hill. This really is a power circuit, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. It's a circuit that suits the V10 and the V12 cylinder engines much more than the V8s. And really the only balance that the V8s have got, I think, is that the fastest V8 cars are running on the Pirelli tyre. So maybe the tyre can offset some of the power loss. It's going to make a very interesting race.
So Alboreto just being overtaken.
This is the quickest part of the circuit we're now on. Alboreto is going to come into the pits, but at this point here the cars are building up speed, 150 miles an hour through this corner, then going up to almost up to 190 miles an hour before they have to brake for the third gear center curves. And of course that corner is going to be the crucial corner in the race, because the start is not very far away from that first corner, and getting through that first segment will be, I think, the key to the race.
One of the other keys to the race, John, of course, is the morning warm-up session, and the big news is that the Ferrari of Alain Prost was fastest. There you see the times. Prost, Senna second fastest, Nigel Mansell third, and Gerhard Berger fourth. So the Williams not showing the form they'd actually shown in qualifying. Let's have a look at the second page of that. Boutsen and Patrese, then Jean Alesi, as you said, the best of the Pirelli runners. Then Nelson Piquet making some progress. John,
yes,
few comments.
They had a pretty poor qualifying session, but they've got up to 8th place in the morning, which is impressive.
And now 9th fastest is Derek Warwick. Lotus starting to make some progress, and very little slower Martin Donnelly. Alio in the 11th spot, and then Martini 12th. Of course, we saw Martini off the front row of the grid in Phoenix. Well, there we are, an empty track at the moment. The race is just a few moments away. Stay with us, we'll be back after these messages. Welcome back, you're live for the Brazilian Grand Prix, flag-to-flag coverage. The start is just 15 minutes away, but let's first look at last year's start where Senna lost all chance of victory in the very first 100 yards.
It really was a very, very difficult position that Berger put himself in, and Senna could have backed off but chose to try and muscle it out with Senna, with Berger, and the consequence was...
Watch the mirror, folks, watch the mirror. Bootson's mirror suddenly gets wiped away by the flying debris. There it goes. Super shots from the in-car camera. And there you see the Ferrari spinning off sideways. Right, well, motor racing, of course, John, is a very technical business indeed. Each race we're attempting to throw some light on the various technical topics. Let's talk tyres with Leo Mel of Goodyear. Prix, we'll be looking at a technical aspect of motor racing. Formula One racing is a very technical sport. And what better way to start than with tyres? With me, Leo Mel, the head of international racing tyres for Goodyear, and we've got with us two sets of tyres. One set on the right here, these are the qualifying tyres which we were talking about with John Watson, and then these are the regular race tyres, and to me they look exactly the same. Leo, your comment?
Internally they are exactly the same. If you take your fingernail and stick it in, you can feel that this set is much softer than this set, and these are qualifying tyres. These tyres will last 2 laps, and these tyres will last 2 hours.
What's actually in these tyres? In fact, these are the race tyres here.
Yes.
What's inside there? I mean, that isn't rubber off a tree, is it, anymore?
No, it's almost all synthetic rubbers. There is an infinite variety of synthetic rubbers you can put in there. In addition, there's an infinite variety of carbon black. Carbon black gives the rubber strength and structure. You put different chemicals in there, you put oils in there, you put lots of vulcanizing agents in there. The average tire has about, tread compound has about 20 to 22 ingredients. The tread compound is a different tread compound, a different chemistry than the sidewall. It's different in the beads. We have about 6 or 7 different types of compound in one single tire. But the tread itself is about 20 ingredients, and it's quite an art just to make the treads.
And they're all handmade, aren't they?
Well, it's very difficult to set a large factory up to run a test. Where you run a test, we will take 15 to 20 different types of tires down to Paul Ricard or Jerez or wherever to do a winter test, and we'll only do 6 tires of each. So it's very difficult to do that. We will bring about I think 3,500 tires here, but there's lots of different varieties. So you can't set a large production line up for race tires, because when we go to Brazil, it'll be totally different tires from this, and we hope to have an all-new setup for Monaco and Imola. So we basically change the whole setup about every race, and even so, they tend to catch up with us once in a while.
And how many men have you got working on this project?
Rio to the Interlagos circuit near São Paulo, and the drivers like it. São Paulo is Ayrton Senna's hometown, and he's yet to win in Brazil. To everyone's surprise, the dominant Jean-Marie Balestre, head man of the sport's governing body, has turned up at Interlagos. Surprise, because after Senna's winter political problems, Balestre is loathed in Brazil. So, Jean-Marie's got guts, and some pretty heavy bodyguards. With a magnificent win in Phoenix 2 weeks ago, Ayrton Senna showed he's lost none of his motivation, and that his McLaren-Honda is better than ever. But the wet and slippery conditions at Interlagos during practice caught even him out. And Senna wasn't the only one to spin. So did Ivan Capelli, and neither he nor teammate Gugelmin qualified. Olivier Griard span too, but after pre-qualifying, he did make the cut in Brazil. In Phoenix, the Ferraris were a bitter disappointment, with neither Mansell nor Prost finishing, but Nigel's much more optimistic here. Jean Alesi was the sensation of Phoenix, second in his 9th Grand Prix in his Tyrrell Ford, and delighted with his success.
For me, it's a dream to race with Ayrton, because 2 years ago or 3 years ago, he's again my hero. But when I was in Formula 3 and when he drove for Lotus, it was my big star. So for me, it's incredible to race with him.
No one's got previous experience at Interlagos, for no one's raced on the rebuilt track. And as Jonathan Palmer explains, they're all going to have a common problem.
With the very high temperatures at Interlagos, life's going to be difficult for the 16,000 horsepower that's about to be unleashed from the starting grid. The amount of cooling an engine needs is proportional to the power it produces, and with 600 to 700 bhp from these units, rather larger radiators are required than those for a family saloon. Well, here they are, 2 of them, one each side of the engine. They're made of lightweight aluminium and have very carefully designed inlet and outlet ducting for maximum efficiency. The vital airflow through these radiators relies purely on forward speed. Unlike ordinary cars, there are no cooling fans. Now, this is no problem when racing, but a very real one for the first few rows of the grid, who, having stopped, must wait for the rest of the field to form up prior to the race start. The drivers' tempers rise about as fast as their temperature gauges, as they pray their engines won't overheat. These days, they're not the only ones who can worry about their engine temperature. In several teams, the information is radioed to the pits too. They aim to keep the water temperature at about 90 degrees C, and this is adjusted during practice. If it stays that way, that's fine, but all too often on this sort of circuit, little pieces of debris, usually tyre rubber, progressively accumulate and partially blank off the radiators. Above 110 degrees, and the driver will notice a power drop-off. Over 120 though, and unless he makes a quick pit stop to unclog the radiators, he'll be walking home.
Interesting and concise views from Sterling Moss, the most successful racing driver never to have won the World Championship. Well, he's recovering from those injuries and has had 3 screws inserted in his hip. Get well soon, Sterling. Interlagos is a circuit where the emphasis is very much on power. What are the differences between the engine configurations found in the modern Grand Prix car? To find out, we talked to Team Lotus Technical Director Frank Durney. Frank Durney is the designer of Lotus cars. You've changed from a V8 engine to a V12 this year. Why all these different configurations?
Well, I think the 8-cylinder engines are more readily available. If you look at the sums, the more cylinders you have, the more horsepower you have. Because the chassis regulations are a lot more strict than they were 10 years ago, one of the big ways in which you can get more performance is more horsepower. The more engine manufacturers around now than there were last time we were normally aspirated, and most of them have chosen a 10 or a 12-cylinder engine rather than an 8, which was common the last time normally aspirated was around. And it's very difficult to know really which is the best solution. A 10 is a little smaller and lighter perhaps, but shouldn't be as powerful as a 12. So you're really trying to balance the shape of a 12, which isn't so convenient, against the horsepower, which should be better.
But why should it be better?
It's got more piston area for a given cubic capacity.
Now Ford, meanwhile, with their brand new engine, which we see in the Benetton, they've stayed with V8. Do you think that's a marketing decision?
No, I think they obviously decided that they could make a competitive engine within the 8-cylinder format. Certainly, if you're a chassis designer, if an engine designer came along and said, we can do as much horsepower with a V8, will that be all right? You would welcome them with open arms, because obviously it's much easier to design a nice car around an 8-cylinder engine than around a 10 or a 12.
Some of the 12s we've seen here are in even different configurations. We've got a flat 12, a boxer. Ferrari used to use that very successfully in the past. That's the Subaru engine. And then we've got a W12, which isn't proving very successful yet in the Life engine. Why have they gone that route?
Well, the flat 12, to be honest, I do not understand. Somebody obviously decided they want horizontally opposed engines, and I cannot for the life of me think what benefit it bestows within a modern layout of a Formula 1 engine with a flat bottom and the various other limitations. I don't see that.
Centre of gravity, of course.
Well, the centre of gravity ends up quite high, because whilst the centre of gravity of the engine's fairly low, you have to put an exhaust system underneath it, and you then end up with the crankshaft having to be raised quite high, so you end up with an engine that has to be mounted very high in the chassis. So the net result, I wouldn't imagine, is very much lower centre of gravity. In fact, it could be higher. The W12 obviously has been done because it's shorter. There have been W configuration engines a long time ago. I'm not an engine man, so I couldn't make any explanation about the problems there might be with bearings and what have you, but certainly having one set of inlet trumpets next to one set of exhaust pipes doesn't appeal to me very much.
3-cylinder heads it's got, and some of the conrods are actually longer than some of the others.
Ah, well, it's adventurous, isn't it?
Say that. You don't expect great success from that engine?
I hate to pour cold water on it, really. You never know. But it's like people say, if the 10-cylinder engine was the way to go, then why hadn't someone done it before? Because you know that, like most of these pieces of technology, they've come and gone in fashion, and nobody has ever built a V10 until this current formula. And yet the World Championship was won by one. The first two teams in the World Championship last year were running 10-cylinder engines, so can't be all bad, can it?
To be able to see the whole race, if you're really interested into it, to be able to stay the whole thing, I think is important, and I hope that I shall use Eurosport on quite a few occasions.
Hello Sterling, hello race fans across Europe. You've joined us for our flag-to-flag live coverage of the Brazilian Grand Prix. I'm Andrew Marriott, my co-commentator, Grand Prix winner John Watson. The burning question, can Ayrton Senna win his home Grand Prix at his 7th attempt in front of a huge Sao Paulo crowd? But first, let's look at the championship standings. There they are. Senna has 9, Alessi has 6, Boutsen 4, Piquet 3, Modena 2, Nakajima 1. That's after the race in Phoenix 2 weeks ago. Coming up next, the constructors' table. McLaren at the top, we've seen them there so many times, 9 points. Tyrrell have 7, they got 2 cars in the top 6 last time out. Williams have 4, Benetton 3, and Brabham, they have 2. Well, Ayrton Senna is off the pole position. We're going to have a look at one of his very quick qualifying laps in just a minute. And here it is. Total commitment from Ayrton Senna. John Watson, talk us through it.
What Ayrton Senna does in these qualifying laps really is quite remarkable. In all the time I've been involved in Grand Prix racing, I've seen people make pole position laps for me once or twice in a season. What Senna has done in his Grand Prix career is absolutely remarkable, and to be able to get into a Grand Prix car, to go out, to know what you have to do and just commit to it. Look at the way he's right on the limit, and he's like that in every corner.
Kicking up the dust, John, and there is a query about his neck, of course.
Yes, on the Friday practice he went over a bump. I think we're going to see the very bump, in fact, very shortly, and he got a nasty sort of crick in his neck. But with the team physiotherapists, they will have been looking at that very, very quickly indeed, and I'm sure there's no problem. Here we are, we're coming up to the part of the circuit. That's the bump that I think gave Ayrton the jar, but I think he'll be very, very well looked after since Friday up to the race this afternoon.
Yes, so John, if he wins this one, there'll certainly be sambering in the streets of Sao Paulo tonight. He is, of course, a Sao Paulo boy. He's never actually raced a car on this racetrack. He's only raced karts here, and there's a separate kart track at this rebuilt circuit. That was his pole time from Friday, which he improved on slightly with a banzai last second lap on the Saturday qualifying session. The very last lap of qualifying, he went just that little bit quicker. And there you see the lakes, which the circuit is named after, Interlagos. They're a bit muddy at the moment. They used to be blue back in the days when you were racing there, John.
I wouldn't want to be in them whether they're muddy or blue. They look terrible.
Yes, and a little close to the track. But let's look at that grid. The grid lineup coming up. There you see, that's Senna's pole time, 17.277. Gerhard Berger making it all McLaren front row. Gerhard on the front row of the grid, both of the first two races of the season. All Williams second row, Boutsen and Patrese. The third row, Mansell and Prost both in the Ferraris and going quick in morning warm-up. Then Jean Alesi in the Tyrrell, the best of the V8s. Martini, De Cesaris. Alio 10th, that's a good performance from the Ligier driver. Eric Bernard 11th, a young driver going places, and another. Stefano Modena in the Brabham. Nelson Piquet down in 13th. Martin Donnelly, good performance for 14th. Nannini 15th. Morbidelli making his Grand Prix debut 16th. Paolo Barilla, the Pasta King. Then it's Aguri Suzuki. Satoru Nakajima behind the other Japanese. Larini, Gruyard, Alboreto and the Arrows. He's got a camera on his car. Derek Warwick, Alex Caffey, and Dalmas right on the bottom of the list. Look at the people who didn't qualify. Johansson and Leto, Onyx in trouble. And the Leighton House is in deep, deep trouble. Capelli and Gugelmin. And Gugelmin finished third last year. Now let's catch up with the latest news. Here's a man rarely out of it, the president of FISA, Jean-Marie Balestre, who apparently rose from his sickbed to make a last-minute trip to São Paulo. In a Saturday press conference, there was the usual rhetoric and fist-waving, and an admittance that he took a perverse pleasure in shouting at the hostile crowd. Everywhere he goes in São Paulo, he is protected by bodyguards. Back to the sporting side, and Saturday's practice and qualifying was generally slower than Friday's thanks to rising temperatures. Senna was the man setting the hot pace, but he did have one momentary lapse during the morning session. There is Senna getting ready for that lap, and now we see him on it. Just watch this one. There he spins off. Seemingly harmless spin, but he finished up in the mud, and he had to be towed out of that one. Nigel Mansell, another man that needed a tow. And as we said, what a difference a year makes. Last year in Rio, Mauricio Gugelmin finished third. This year, he is a non-qualifier with the Leighton House team. Thierry Boutsen can never be underestimated, and the Williams squad have had very few problems during practice. There's a camera on his car today. And Jean Alesi has continued to show his Phoenix form. His Tyrrell improved Saturday, and he starts the best Pirelli and best V8 starter. Little Pierluigi Martini from Ravenna in Italy continues to shine. Camel Team Lotus have been beset with problems, but in this morning's warm-up, there was some consolation. Derek Warwick continues to maintain that the car and the Lamborghini engine has tremendous potential, and Martin Donnelly, who failed to get off the grid in Phoenix, continues to impress. But with so little testing behind them, the team, headed by veteran Tony Rudd, will be happy to finish in the top 6 today. Well, the man who gave Lotus their first Grand Prix win, Sterling Moss, is still in the news. Sterling broke his leg last weekend, crashed his moped. We talked to him in his hospital bed.
I think that Formula One racing today is very, very exciting. I enjoy the events I see, and I watch all of those that I can. I think it's extremely competitive. I personally believe that Senna is still the man to beat. I have a great respect for Senna because I don't know him that well. He's not an easy person to get to know and communicate with. But I have a great respect for him, I think, because he's a real racer. When Senna has a go, boy, he really does move. I mean, so does Nigel. He's quick. Berger's quick. Prost is quick. But to me, at the moment, Senna has the edge. I think, obviously, McLaren at the moment, you know, the car, and we've seen lots of others come up. But I think they're unbeatable. But while they're in the position they're in, it's rather like us driving for Mercedes. When you drove for Mercedes, people weren't considering winning. They were trying to be first non-Mercedes, which is an awful attitude for people to have, and it takes a tremendously strong character. You can get up and say, well, I'm not, you know, I want to win and so on, but it takes a great character who really believes he can beat the power of that time of Mercedes, and of course we had Fangio. But a man who can get up and thinks he can actually beat McLaren, Honda and Senna together, and feels it and doesn't just say it, is quite a person, and I think that's going to take quite a guy to do it, because he's got to have the ability as well. I think Nigel can do it, but can the car do it yet? At the moment one has to doubt that. So I think it'll be exciting. I think we're going to see better racing, because I think there is a doubt now. There's a slight crack. We hope that maybe this will come forth, and let's just hope that Balestre and people don't argue and let us get on with such a wonderful sport.
Some very sage comments there from Sterling Moss. Sterling, get well soon. Hope that thigh repairs quicker than you hope. I know you're wanting to do the Pirelli Marathon in June, so Sterling, a speedy recovery from you. Well, let's look at the Interlagos circuit now on the map just coming up. There it is. This rebuilt circuit, originally it was 5 miles, now it's 2.5. Some original sections, some of the old sections we actually go backwards on. John Watson, perhaps you'd just like to take us through it.
Yes, we're entering the Senna curves, third gear dropping downhill into the Curve du Sol, then the back straight, sixth gear in about 180 miles an hour, then braking, taking fourth gear, turning left, turning right, left, right, up the hill again, braking again, back into fourth gear and accelerating into the slowest part of the track. Is back to first gear, then quickly second, third, back to first, then up third, fourth, back over that nasty bump, then up the hill again. This is now the fastest part of the circuit. The McLarens and the Ferraris in qualifying and practice were doing 190 miles an hour.
Yeah, I think, John, we're going to see it in car now. Recorded on Friday. Yes, we were with Michele Alboreto. Just take us through the gear change.
Well, Alboreto's just taken fifth gears on the back straight, now into sixth gear. And in the arrows, he'll be probably doing 180 miles an hour, just under. Back down into fourth gear for this very quick left-hand corner. This going between the two lakes. The drivers were a bit concerned about the lakes being close to the circuit. If they had a problem, they felt that it's possible that a car could actually get over the barriers and get into that lake, which would be very, very, very unfortunate for that particular driver.
Yeah, people have been in the water in Monaco, but that would be a bit different. Looks a bit muddy, that lot.
Well, it's very muddy, but of course I don't know whether they've got anybody there on the lake to provide a safety. They've got a boat and an aqualand scuba diver.
There is the arrows accelerating up the hill. This really is a power circuit, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. It's a circuit that suits the V10 and the V12 cylinder engines much more than the V8s. And really the only balance that the V8s have got, I think, is that the fastest V8 cars are running on the Pirelli tyre. So maybe the tyre can offset some of the power loss. It's going to make a very interesting race.
So Alboreto just being overtaken.
This is the quickest part of the circuit we're now on. Alboreto is going to come into the pits, but at this point here the cars are building up speed, 150 miles an hour through this corner, then going up to almost up to 190 miles an hour before they have to brake for the third gear center curves. And of course that corner is going to be the crucial corner in the race, because the start is not very far away from that first corner, and getting through that first segment will be, I think, the key to the race.
One of the other keys to the race, John, of course, is the morning warm-up session, and the big news is that the Ferrari of Alain Prost was fastest. There you see the times. Prost, Senna second fastest, Nigel Mansell third, and Gerhard Berger fourth. So the Williams not showing the form that they'd actually shown in qualifying. Let's have a look at the second page of that. Boutsen and Patrese, then Jean Alesi, as you said, the best of the Pirelli runners. Then Nelson Piquet making some progress. John,
yes,
few comments.
They had a pretty poor qualifying session, but they've got up to 8th place in the morning, which is impressive.
And now 9th fastest was Derek Warwick. Lotus starting to make some progress, and very little slower Martin Donnelly. Alio in the 11th spot, and then Martini 12th. Of course, we saw Martini off the front row of the grid in Phoenix. Well, there we are, an empty track at the moment. The race is just a few moments away. Stay with us, we'll be back after these messages. Welcome back, you're live for the Brazilian Grand Prix, flag-to-flag coverage. The start is just 15 minutes away, but let's first look at last year's start, where Senna lost all chance of victory in the very first 100.
It really was a very, very difficult position that Berger put himself in, and Senna could have backed off, but chose to try and muscle it out with Senna, with Berger, and the consequence was...
Watch the mirror, folks, watch the mirror. Boutsen's mirror suddenly gets wiped away by the flying debris. There it goes. Super shots from the in-car camera. And there you see the Ferrari spinning off sideways. Right, well, motor racing, of course, John, is a very technical business indeed. Each race we're attempting to throw some light on the various technical topics. Let's talk tyres with Leo Mel of Goodyear. Prix, we'll be looking at a technical aspect of motor racing. Formula One racing is a very technical sport. And what better way to start than with tyres? With me, Leo Mel, the head of international racing tyres for Goodyear, and we've got with us two sets of tyres. One set on the right here, these are the qualifying tyres which we were talking about with John Watson, and then these are the regular race tyres, and to me they look exactly the same. Leo, your comment?
Internally they are exactly the same. If you take your fingernail and stick it in, you can feel that this set is much softer than this set, and these are qualifying tyres. These tyres will last 2 laps, and these tyres will last 2 hours.
What's actually in these tyres? In fact, these are the race tyres here.
Yes.
What's inside there? I mean, that isn't rubber off a tree, is it, anymore?
No, it's almost all synthetic rubbers. There's an infinite variety of synthetic rubbers you can put in there. In addition, there's an infinite variety of carbon black. The carbon black gives the rubber strength and structure. You put different chemicals in there, you put oils in there, you put lots of vulcanizing agents in there. The average tire has about, tread compound has about 20 to 22 ingredients. The tread compound is a different tread compound, a different chemistry than the sidewall. It's different in the beads. We have about 6 or 7 different types of compound in one single tire. But the tread itself is about 20 ingredients, and it's quite an art just to make the treads.
And they're all handmade, aren't they?
Well, it's very difficult to set a large factory up to run a test. Where you run a test, we will take 15 to 20 different types of tires down to Paul Ricard or Jerez or wherever to do a winter test, and we'll only do 6 tires of each. So it's very difficult to do that. We will bring about I think 3,500 tires here, but there's lots of different varieties. So you can't set a large production line up for race tires, because when we go to Brazil, it'll be totally different tires from this, and we hope to have an all-new setup for Monaco and Imola. So we basically change the whole setup about every race, and even so, they tend to catch up with us once in a while.
And how many men have you got working on this project? We are live at Interlagos. That is the scene at the moment. You can see the cars all lined up on the grid. A lot of the mechanics walking back to the pits. An absolutely capacity crowd behind the city of Sao Paulo. Officially it has a population of around 5 million, but many more. Some of them living in little shanty towns which are very close to the racetrack. But here you see the activity on the grid. And John, what are all those people doing there?
Well, the drivers are just getting themselves settled into the car. People will be putting shielding over the fuel tank so as they keep temperature away from the fuel tank. They want the fuel to remain as cool as possible. They're running capacity. The cars are jacked up on the stands. You see the tire covers on them. Those are thermostatically controlled so as when the car actually starts the race tire will be at an operating temperature, and therefore they don't have to lose 1 or 2 laps getting the tire up to that temperature. It's a time when the mechanics are just wondering, have they done everything they should have done? And the driver sitting there wondering, has the mechanic done everything he's meant to do as well?
Yes, well, word that there is the possibility of a thunderstorm during the race. We'll have to watch for that. Sure, that's unnerving some of the drivers.
I think a thunderstorm in Brazil is what we've seen over the last 2 days. Is nothing like what you might be seeing in Europe. It is just torrential rain and everything is flooded. And of course, the circuit being new, there's a lot of mud on the side of the circuit where the grass has not yet been regrown. So if it rains very heavily, and it will be a major problem. And of course it'll be a wet race. It'll be declared a wet race. They may have to in fact even bring the cars off the racetrack, stop, and then start part 2 of the 1990 Brazil Grand Prix.
And of course that spin we saw from Senna during Saturday's practice, really a harmless spin, but he got off on the grass. It was just really sticky there. Presumably there had been some construction vehicles over that area a few days before, and he couldn't remove it from there.
Well, that wasn't too bad. In fact, what happened to Capelli on the Thursday was he went off in a similar part of the circuit, and the track and the ground there was still so wet that he had to tow him out. He was up to the axles.
Well, there is Jean-Marie Balestre, and with him saw a fleeting view of Yvonne Leon, the Secretary General of FISA. This is perhaps the most hated man in Brazil. The Brazilians very much on the side of Ayrton Senna. He is a local boy and they've been booing him. I understand, John, there's some T-shirts on sale outside the gates, very derogatory about the president.
Yes, I think that's probably very, very simply a case of the Brazilian fans don't think he's their favourite person.
Apparently, Balestra addressed the crowd. Didn't see it myself, but they just booed him. We were working away on our notes. But here we see the grid again. Jesuis, Alain, Bernard, Modena, Piquet, Donnelly, Nannini, Morbidelli. I'm impressed with Morbidelli, actually. It's a good performance because he crashed in Phoenix, standing in the Dallara for Emanuele Pirro, who's laid up with that bug. Wish him well. Alboreto Warwick looking quite good in that warm-up session.
Yes, the Lotuses, they really have got a lot of promise, the car. Of course, the car really is about a month behind schedule. They didn't get any real pre-race season testing, and they're really paying the penalty for that situation right now. And once the Grand Prix season starts, it is hard to catch up, but they've got quite a long gap between Brazil and the first European Grand Prix in Imola, and I'm sure their intensive testing program will take on a very high degree of intensity.
Well, you just saw an aerial shot of the circuit. In fact, you could see parts of the old 5-mile, 8-kilometre circuit as well. And this is the front row of the grid. The red and whites of the McLaren team. Ron Dennis very much in charge, of course. There's Alessandro Nannini with the Benetton Ford. Nelson Piquet would like to have a good win here, because remember, Ayrton Senna, 21 victories in his career, but has not won his home Grand Prix. And I think, John, that very first corner you think is going to be crucial.
Yes, it's about a 300-metre run-up from the start grid to that first corner. It's a slowish corner, and with the cars all packed together, there's always the difficulty and the concern of what we saw in Phoenix would happen, where two cars fell over each other. Patrese lost the nose off as Williams. He had to come into the pits. So it's going to be a concern. And of course, I think on this particular racetrack, there aren't too many obvious overtaking places that we've been able to see. So he who gets into the corner first is going to have a big advantage. And I'm assuming that that man will be Ayrton Senna, but you never can be sure. Anything can happen at the start. And whoever gets there first will have, I think, a major advantage in the early part of this race.
You got her phone number, John?
I do, Andrew. I'll give it to you later.
Thought you might. This circuit, named after a great racing driver, Carlos Pache, contemporary of yours, a contemporary of Emerson Fittipaldi's, who cut his racing teeth in Britain in Formula 3 racing, and then drove in 72 Grand Prix, actually, for March 30s, of course, and then with Brabham. He was very sadly killed in a light aircrane accident in 1977. He won the race here in 1975. Just a quick word about Carlos.
Well, Carlos and I were teammates briefly. I'm afraid it was a very brief because of his accident, and I enjoyed his company very much. He was the #1 driver in the Brabham team at that time, and I found him one of the most enjoyable and easiest people to work with in my Grand Prix career. And I think the loss of Pache to motor racing and at that time to the Brabham team was a great loss.
In fact, said to be Bernie Ecclestone's favourite driver that's ever driven for him. Well, there you see, Bernie Ecclestone, of course, no longer owning the Brabham team. That's now in new ownership, Japanese ownership, the Middlebridge Group, and they've got great things planned for the team. But now we're getting ready for the warm-up lap. Any special pointers for the warm-up lap, John? We usually see the cars swerving about a little bit just to keep that temperature up in the tyres.
Yes, they will probably move. Some of them will move around, some of them don't bother. But of course, this racetrack, with it being a new racetrack, parts of it are still actually quite dirty, so the cars that are on the part of the circuit that is not the racing line will be conscious of getting dust, dirt, gravel, extra rubber dust on their tyres, so they will be trying to keep the tyres as clean as possible. They certainly will be warm, the tyres will be up to an operating temperature, but of course that only will encourage the dirt on the circuit to stick to the tyres even more. So the people down the back of the grid, it's obviously going to be a much more difficult time than the two McLarens, the two Williams and the two Ferraris who are on the front 3 rows.
Yes, 71 laps this race. That's 190.7 miles, 307.075 kilometres. At Phoenix we saw a race that almost went 2 hours, and we calculate that this race is going to be maybe about an hour and 35 minutes long. An hour and 35 minutes in the heat, though, is going to be an exhausting business.
And this actually is a very physical circuit, although it's lots more simplified than the original Interlagos circuit. The cars and drivers are finding it quite exhausting, and there are a number of corners where they're getting a pounding, and that nasty bump we saw Senna earlier in the clip where he got his neck jarred will be just another facet of the circuit that will add to the fatigue of the drivers.
Quite a lot of talk in Phoenix about problems with necks, and it wasn't that apparent, of course, in Phoenix because of its 90-degree street circuit nature. But here there are some long, fast corners. I just wonder if some drivers will be having some problems with that.
Usually in the start of a season, drivers tend to be a little bit more tender. As they go through the season, they literally toughen up. And training for a racing driver is really very unique. It just involves being in a race car and doing a lot of miles. It's quite hard to simulate the kind of stresses and G-forces that your body and your neck in particular are going to be subjected to in a Grand Prix. So the only way to get yourself truly race fit is to go motor racing. But some people like Senna are exceptionally fit indeed, and Alain, Prost, Nigel Mansell, those in particular I know are absolutely as fit as it's possible to be. But some of the people maybe further down the field who don't have the facilities or the opportunity to train maybe quite as intensively may well suffer as the race progresses.
It's because you don't need to be particularly muscly, do you?
No, muscle, in fact, bulk is a very bad thing for a Grand Prix driver. You want to be quite lean, and you want to have muscles that are essentially small but very, what I would call, fast muscles. It's stamina, is the ability to pace yourself. Sports like jogging, running or swimming, where you build up stamina rather than building up pure weightlifting muscles. Weightlifting muscles are just a waste of time.
Unless, of course, you get in a fight with the governing body, perhaps.
Well, let's hope that wouldn't be that kind of fight, Andrew.
Right, coming up to the grid now. This will be the start. It's Riccardo Patrese. 4 camera cars today. Williams team looking particularly good in qualifying. 3rd and 4th fastest. Gerhard Berger, remember, made that mistake in Phoenix, so he'll be trying to forget about that.
Just watching Patrese, you see he stayed as long as he could on the right-hand side of the track, because the left-hand side, the bit beside the pit wall, is dirty, and all the cars that are on the inside are, I think, at a disadvantage at the start. The inside of the track will be dusty. There'll be lots of little sort of rubber, almost like marbles. So Senna on the right-hand side of the track is going to have a definite advantage. So is Thierry Boutsen directly behind him, and Nigel Mansell, who's behind Boutsen.
Right, a long wait. The lights will go red, and within 7 seconds will flick to green. Very quick start. Senna immediately into the lead. Berger second. Boutsen third.
A lacy touch with one of those Ferraris.
He got sandwiched. Somebody else shot off backwards into the dirt. We'll pick up that in just a second. But it's Ayrton Senna in the lead. The first of 71 laps. Senna leads.
I think it was Andrea de Cesaris that Alain collided with, and his car is out of the race. It's in the kitty litter, as they call it, the first corner. So the problem that we anticipated didn't come at the front of the grid. It came in the 4th row.
Let's see that high shot of it. That's what happens. Alain coming through very quickly.
And he just catches the left rear of Andrea de Cesaris' car, and he's out of the race. Alain through in 7th, but we don't know is whether that has done any damage to Alain's car. We have to wait and see at the end of that first lap whether Alain will have to make a pit stop for a damaged wheel, or possibly even he's got a puncture. But that was the start that Ayrton Senna had hoped for.
Senna's certainly not pulling away from Berger. We have seen Senna make some sensational starts in the past and really romp away from the opposition on the first lap. That tremendous ability of his to concentrate so hard and go for it right from the start. Yellow flags waving, but no red flags, so the race continues with Senna leading. Second, Gerhard Berger. Third is Thierry Boutsen.
There's a bit of a front nose or a wing lying on the track. I think that's why the yellow flags were flying at this first corner. De Cesaris' car is far enough off the track for that not to be a problem.
Got a lot of sparks coming from the back of the car, John. Presumably they've got it set very low there.
Yes, the car is low. And we've got Nannini in the pits, Alessandro Nannini, his nose, the right front wing in his car. That was the bit of, I think, the front wing that we saw. That's why the yellow flags were being waved at the first corner at the end of the first lap. De Cesare's making his way back now. He is actually back on the track very, very slowly.
That does surprise me, because he seemed to go into the barrier quite high from what we can see from the top shot.
But Berger now is actually almost kissing the rear of Senna's car.
Yes, Berger poking the nose right up the transverse gearbox of the McLaren. McLaren, one of the teams that went to transverse gearboxes fairly late on. And had a few problems with it, certainly working well now. 6-speed gearboxes, remember, in a Grand Prix car. They also have reverse. 7-speed gearbox in the Ferrari semi-automatic. And the Williams not losing touch either. The yellow flag still being waved. Nigel Mansell in 4th spot.
The McLaren's sparking like this. They haven't often run the car as low as they are to the ground at this particular race, and both cars are sparking identically. They're little skid blocks on the bottom of the chassis, and they've got titanium in them, and that's what the spark is coming from. The chassis themselves are made of a carbon fiber plastic honeycomb composite, so if it was scraping on the ground, it would be actually scraping away the bottom of the chassis. So those little skid blocks, there's nothing dangerous or to be worried about when you see those sparks. They're there purely to protect the chassis, and the titanium will be there by the time the race finishes.
Just about 4-5 cars lengths in it between Ayrton Senna racing on home soil and the tall Austrian Gerhard Berger, and the Williams Renault keeping in touch on to lap 4.
Gerhard Berger, I think, looks more comfortable, I would say, in the Brazil Grand Prix than he did 2 weeks ago in Phoenix. You know, although he's running right behind his teammate, he hasn't got any pressure off his teammate, which he was coming under pressure in Phoenix, and whether that was a contribution to him sliding off into the tar wall, I don't really know. But I think running behind Senna like this is probably more comfortable for him than he might have wished to be in the front.
Well, Dallara in the pits. Yeah, Berger is very close.
Yes, in fact, I have to say he looks like he's trying to push Senna to speed. Maybe Senna's wanting to run at a pace which is not really the true potential of him or the car, but one that is comfortable. Once the race gets into maybe half distance, he can afford to speed up. This was something he did in Phoenix. He didn't charge really hard at the beginning of the race. He waited until the first 15 or so laps before he made really any significant inroads into Jean Alesi's lead.
Well, there you see the view of the front 2 cars from Thierry Boutsen's car. That's what he's challenging, and he really is challenging.
Yes, indeed, he's catching up. He's closed up to Berger. In fact, Senna's edged away ever so slightly on this lap, but Boutsen has in fact come up to Berger by about 2 or 3 car lengths.
One man who's made a lot of progress up the field, Martin Donnelly, up to 12th spot. So your fellow Ulsterman doing well, John, in what is only his 2nd Grand Prix. Remember, he wasn't able to make the start in Phoenix.
Well, I'm delighted to see Martin, because it's been a difficult start to his Grand Prix career. Disappointment in Phoenix, but a very good performance this morning in the warm-up, and now running in 12th place. So I'm looking to Martin as one of the leading British drivers, and Senna went very, very wide there, actually, coming out of that corner.
Senna leading his home Grand Prix. The Grand Prix is never won, but being pushed very hard indeed by his teammate Gerhard Berger, and neither of them can relax, because right there is Thierry Boutsen, the Belgian, who tells us he gets 9 hours sleep, likes to have 9 or 10 hours sleep a night. Seems to be working for him.
Lucky chap, he can sleep so long at night. But he is now putting pressure on Berger. And this is not something we had anticipated. The Williams, again in Phoenix 2 weeks ago, wasn't particularly startling in its performance, but it has been very impressive here over the Brazil weekend. Both these cars, in fact, have got V10 engines. A very unusual configuration for a Grand Prix engine. It's something that Honda and Renault introduced last year, and it's the first time we've ever seen a V10 engine. Normally a V8 or V12 is what one associates with a 3.5 litre engine, but a V10 is obviously a pretty good design and certainly very efficient and compact.
As that's one of the technical topics we covered earlier in Grand Prix weekend. There you have the top 6: Senna, Berger, Boutsen, Prost in 4th place, Nigel Mansell 5th, and Riccardo Patrese in 6th. So the top 6 qualifiers in the top 6 places, but have shuffled around a little bit. Alessi is 7th and Martini is 8th. That's the top 8. Ayrton Senna turned 30 just earlier this week. Certainly likes his native Brazil, John, doesn't he? He tries to get back between every Grand Prix, and I think he's got a Learjet or some similar machine to whisk him back between each Grand Prix. We're going on to lap 7 of the 71. What about Senna's lifestyle?
Yes, Ayrton Senna, he lives a very almost solitary lifestyle. Although he has a flat in Monte Carlo when he is in Europe, he now tries to return home to São Paulo as often as possible, and it's a very big part of his life, his family, the closeness of that family unit, and he gets great strength and I think inspiration from his family, and I admire him very much for the fact that he does go home so often. Not many drivers would do that. They tend to sort of take up residence somewhere, Monte Carlo or even in the Isle of Man, and you know, that family life is a very important part of any person's life, Grand Prix driver or not.
Ayrton Senna da Silva, of course, his full name. Da Silva, something of Smith in his native Brazil. And when he started racing in Britain, in Formula Ford, and Formula Ford 2000, the first couple of years he was always called Ayrton Senna da Silva. And he's a guy that's got an eye to the publicity charts, and he decided that because his name was Smith, if you like, or Brown, that he needed a more unusual name, and Senna, I believe, is his mother's maiden name, and quite a few Brazilians tend to do this, drop their father's name and use their mother's name. But there you see Boutsen pushing hard now after Gerhard Berger.
I think Boutsen's going to have a little sniff down the inside. He's not quite far. Oh, he has, he's done it. Can he stop it? Can he get it round the corner? He has. That was a he got a really good shot coming up behind Berger and went down the inside. A very, very brave manoeuvre, because Berger was not about to give way, but certainly the gap was there and Boutsen took it. That was a very good pass.
I wonder if Gerhard's got some problems, because he was right behind Ayrton Senna, and now you can see he's dropped well back.
In that lap he did drop back about maybe a second or so on Senna, so maybe there's something either with the tyre or a problem that we're not yet aware of. But Senna's continuing on his way quite contentedly, and of course he's now got Thierry Boutsen in his mirrors instead of his teammate Gerhard Berger.
We saw Thierry and the Canon Williams win 2 races last year, both in the wet in Canada, which helped him with his latest sponsorship deal. And then of course at the end of the season, that absolutely faultless drive in Adelaide. And now Alain Prost, I think, is starting to push hard for 3rd spot, and Oliver Griard up to some action, yes. And he spins off, just tipped an arrows.
Yes, he caught the back of Michele Alboretto's arrows there and trying to go around the outside. Really, I couldn't see what he thought he was going to achieve. There's no room for anyone to go around the outside, and that was the inevitability of Griard's move.
It'll be interesting to see if he can extricate himself from the sticky brown mud.
Yeah, I think he has. There's no car there now. That was a recording we saw. So he's continuing on his way.
2.6 seconds between Ayrton Senna and this man, Thierry Boutsen. Just taking a very tight apex there, John, almost on the ripple strips.
Yes, he looks at the car, just watching the car. It does appear to have very good grip. He's able to drive the car right into the corner, and he's able to hold it into the corner as well. Sometimes some cars are not actually working as well. The combination of the car and the tyres, that partnership is so important for a racing car. Right now the Williams looks to be working extremely well.
News that Derek Warwick is currently in 17th position, running the Lamborghini V12 engine in 1990 format for the first time. Previously there was an interim specification on that Chrysler-backed engine. Across the start-finish line, putting another lap under his belt, Ayrton Senna. His crash helmet there, an adaptation of the Brazilian national colours. In fact, the motto on the Brazilian flag, John, is order and progress. I'm not quite sure about the order and progress in Brazil at the moment, because the new premier of Brazil, Fernando Collor, who came into office just a week ago, has frozen everybody's assets in the bank. I think you can only get about £400 maximum out of the bank. Everything else has been frozen for a year and a half at least, in a bid to try and bring down inflation. And this has caused the teams enormous problems, because another measure to stop inflation has been to effectively outlaw the dollar. You can hardly spend the dollar because the rate is so detrimental. And because of this, teams who have come, or virtually everybody in the Grand Prix circus who have come with the US dollars, have found it very difficult to actually spend them. Or if they spend them at outrageous costs. And there's been many, many problems. And at one stage on Thursday, it's possible the race wouldn't even be on.
Well, I think the fact that we've got a Brazilian Grand Prix at all really is I think, the biggest miracle that's happened in Brazil over the last few weeks. It was so close. Even on Thursday there was a very strong possibility, because of all these economic problems, that the race may not take place. But I'm delighted to see the 1990 Brazil Grand Prix moving ahead, and with certainly an interesting racetrack.
Senna pulling away a little bit from Thierry Boutsen, 2.9 seconds the gap. Still the little shower of sparks in the back of Ayrton Senna's car.
There's the second Brazilian driver in the race, Nelson Piquet, in the Benetton, and he's got Filipe Alliot running within a couple of seconds of him, which is, I think, more of a good performance on the part of Alliot, who's certainly proved to be a very fast driver, but he seems to be one that fairly often is in the catch fencing or in the tower wall, whatever. If he could ever control the speed he had, Piquet going very wide, that was a very strange entry to the corner there. And he was completely off the line at the point he entered the corner.
Piquet, a Formula winner, of course. After 10 of the 71 laps, Senna, Boutsen, Berger, Prost, Mansell, Patrese, that's the order. What do you think about the move from the Rio track to Interlagos, John?
Track for track, it's, I think the Interlagos track is basically a better circuit. I would have preferred if it was on the old circuit, I have to say, because it really was a fantastic circuit. But today motor racing is not about racetracks, it's about many other factors. It's about business and principle. And in São Paulo have been able to come up with a very, very satisfactory package. I mean, the new pits and the facilities, although they're not yet completed, are outstanding, and I think that one has to give tremendous credit to the Brazilians to be able to do what they've done, and they've done it in a remarkably short space of time as well.
The lead extended now to 3 seconds. The master at work, Ayrton Senna. Desperately keen, of course, to win Brazilian Grand Prix. Meanwhile, Alain Prost is closing up on Gerhard Berger. First Grand Prix here in Interlagos, is the first Formula One race back in 1971. In fact, before the first Brazilian Grand Prix for the World Championship, there was a couple of non-championship races. And of course, this circuit hosted the Grand Prix from 1973 to 78, in fact, the long version of it. Then again, the race went to Rio in 78, in fact, and then After that, 1981, the race went to Rio permanently until 1989. A couple of other Grand Prix, well, international tracks, should we say, in Brazil. Circuit in Brasilia, named after Nelson Piquet, that hosted a non-championship race some years back. And of course the circuit at Guyana, which you've seen on Eurosport with the motorcycle Grand Prix. But in fact the motorcycle Grand Prix is going to come here to Sao Paulo this year. You'll be able to see that on Eurosport. Earlier today, the Japanese motorcycle Grand Prix. And a very good win for Wayne Rainey. And the same sponsor colours as this car. There's Alex Caffey, man with the damaged shoulder. Mr. Phoenix in the footwork arrows. So, we've got Ayrton Senna in the lead, Thierry Boutsen second, Gerhard Berger third. Stay with us, we'll be back.
But Anesi must be worrying some of the leading group now, because he's starting to tack himself onto the back of the leading group, and his team have stated that he's going to try and go through without a tyre change, and the Pirelli runners, or in his case, are running a very hard compound. So if he can go this quickly on a hard compound and it can last, and they've got to make a stop, they must be starting to scratch their heads.
Well, this race and Phoenix, of course, underlines the moral fibre and the determination of Ayrton Senna, who must have had one of the most miserable winters of any driver in the history of Grand Prix racing, with all the political aggravation that he had to face about whether he was going to apologise to FISA, the governing body, after accusing them of manipulating the World Championship last year, whether or not his $100,000 fine was going to be paid. And right at the last moment, McLaren paid his fine, and Senna wrote a letter which, if you read it very carefully, could be seen to be some sort of a retraction, but I think he would maintain it wasn't. Now, there is the gap.
After 13 of the 71 laps, hometown boy Ayrton Senna leads the Brazilian Grand Prix. You're live on Eurosport. Senna first, Boutsen second, Berger third, Prost fourth, Mansell fifth, Riccardo Patrese sixth. Report from the pits that Eric Bernard is out of the race. Yes, it looks as if Bernard's race is run. Well, they are working on Bernard's car in the pits, so he may be able to continue. Problem for the young and talented Frenchman. That's the gap between Alain Prost and Gerhard Berger, 0.9 of a second. John Watson, your thoughts on the race so far?
Well, it's very much as I anticipated, Senna taking the lead, and but what we're seeing in Ayrton Senna, I think, this year is not the kind of man who got into the race and tried to build up the biggest possible lead in the shortest possible space of time. He's measuring his driving, I think, very much more this season. He knows that winning a race, you've got to finish first. Now, whether you finish first by a second or a minute doesn't really matter. And he's driving a race at a particularly comfortable pace. He's not abusing the car, he's not abusing his tyres, he's easy on the fuel. And really, I think we're seeing sort of a sense of maturity in Ayrton Senna's driving, which was something at times last year we weren't sure that he had. But I think now that season, that winter of discontent, has probably had some effect on him, and to my mind has had a positive effect.
Yes, a lot of people wondered if all the shenanigans over the winter would affect him mentally. I think he genuinely did consider retiring from the sport because of all the hassle. Thankfully he didn't. He is, in my view, the finest driver in Grand Prix racing at the moment. It shone all the way through the lower league, John, didn't it? See him in Formula Ford, Formula Ford 2000, Formula 3, when we saw him racing in Britain. He was head and shoulders above the opposition.
Yes, he was. In fact, this man, his whole life has been dedicated to motor racing, first of all, but also to excellence in motor racing. Every formula that he's been in, he's been a winner. And the guy has just had a life which has been wall-to-wall motor racing.
Karting before that, of course. He never quite made the World Championship in karting. But here is Gerhard Berger. Seems to be settling down pretty well in that number 2 slot at McLaren.
Yes, McLaren, of course, are a much different team to that of Ferrari, where he was for the last 3 seasons. At McLaren, you do have to work very, very hard indeed. The team is an extremely, how can you say, the amount of testing and development that goes on behind the scenes is greater than any other team do, and Berger sometimes gets sent over to Japan to do some testing. And Prost is actually looking very threatening coming up here, having a look as he's done it. He did the very same thing that Thierry Boutsen did. He got the slingshot up this long straight. Gerhard Berger didn't do anything to prevent Prost passing, so one assumes that Berger may have some sort of problem. Otherwise, I don't think he would have allowed Prost to come up the inside quite so politely, let's say.
Yes, Nigel Mansell running about 4 seconds behind that duo.
But can we see if Alain Prost is going to pull away now from Berger and catch up to the tail of Thierry Boutsen and the Williams?
Derek Warwick in the pits, problems for Derek Warwick, so the Lotus revival today a little short-lived. Martin Donnelly still going.
It's interesting looking at the side of the Ferrari, there's big black squares on the side of it, and what those are in fact are extra cooling ducts. Being at 2,500 feet above sea level, the air is that bit thinner, and with a higher ambient temperature today, obviously the cooling on the Ferrari is a little bit marginal, so they've got these detachable panels which they can take off, such as a race in Brazil with a high temperature, so they've got that covered. But it is interesting that they've had to do it. It's the first time I've seen those covers off that car, I think, in almost a year.
What about loss of power at this high altitude?
All engines lose some power at altitude. It probably has a bigger effect on the V8 engines than on the V12. The technical reasons for that, it really is something we'll leave for the technical file sometime later, but the V12 engine and the V10 engines probably are coping better with the altitude than the V8s.
Losing how much horsepower?
I would imagine they would lose maybe about 30 to 40 horsepower. But look at this. Alessandro Nannini joining the race again and passing Gregor Wojtek.
Question mark hanging over Gregor Wojtek's continuing career with Brabham. Apparently only has a 2-race contract. All sorts of suggestions in the motoring press of different people who might get the seat. Young David Brabham is one of them. Jonathan Palmer's another man that has been named. I believe that the Middlebridge management haven't actually taken a decision yet. Gregor Wojtek's father, Carl, has been involved in the takeover of the Onyx team, but it's by no means certain that he will actually join that Onyx team. Peter Monteverdi, who makes the luxury cars in Switzerland, the overall owner of Onyx. And John, you've been quite close to that team in the past because they come from Bogdan Regis, as indeed you do these days. What's the latest on Onyx, who sadly failed to qualify?
Well, Onyx have got a new owner, this gentleman Peter Monteverdi, and the management of the team in 1989, principally Mike Earle and Joe Chamberlain, they left the team just after the Australian Grand Prix and made an attempt to buy over the Brabham team. They weren't successful, so they then diverted their sponsors and investors back to Onyx, and have managed to acquire the team on behalf of Mr. Monteverdi, and it's like 4 months of the year didn't exist, and Nelson Piquet is putting out and passing Stefano Modena.
It's a good old scrap, that, in fact.
It is.
4.3 seconds now between Ayrton Senna in the lead and Thierry Boutsen in second place. This is lap 19 of the 71. And there is Nelson Piquet, who has repassed Stefano Modena. Modena, who comes indeed from the city of Modena. Former Formula 3000 driver. Just seeing that in repeat.
In fact, Piquet was well into the pit lane as he went past Modena there, but that's a part of the circuit that is actually part of the racetrack, although there's double yellow lines and indications telling you shouldn't do it. The pit lane and the pit entry do technically count as being part of the racetrack.
Benetton hoping to replace that car reasonably soon. John Barnard, of course, on the strength of Benetton Ford these days. You hear stories, John, of huge amounts of money being paid to designers.
Yes, well, designers are actually almost a rarer object than racing drivers. There are very few what I would consider world-class designers these days, and those that do exist, and of course John Barnard is one of them, if not the leading one. are able to command substantial sums of money for their services. And as there are very few of them, and as teams are competing to get their services, the price spirals upwards and upwards.
Some of it close up to some of the driver superstars.
Yes, but of course, if you don't have a good designer in a team who can produce a fantastic, an outstanding car to give the top drivers the chance to win, it's one of those cycles. If you don't have the right keys to the door, you never get to open the door. So if Ayrton Senna didn't have the group that, for example, he has at McLaren around him, we wouldn't see him here leading this race. If he was in a march, he probably wouldn't have qualified for the race, or I could Leighton House these days, as it's called.
Setting such a hot pace
for the race.
Yeah, setting such a hot pace now that he's just lapped Alessandro Nannini. McLaren, of course, the team that developed this carbon fibre for the use in racing cars, this space-age material. John Watson, of course, one of the very first men ever to drive a carbon fibre car.
Yes, I think it was, and certainly I think it was the first person to win a Grand Prix with a carbon fibre honeycomb construction car in 1981. And in fact, the principles that were applied in 81 are exactly the same principles that are applied to this 1990 McLaren we're seeing Senna and Berger racing today.
Your best result in Brazil back in 1982. The records show you were second, John, but you didn't actually get on the victory podium,
no, I didn't.
You?
There was a problem, there was a protest. Both Piquet and Rosberg were disqualified for the race for some minor technical infringements, and I think I got to hear about it later on in the hotel.
I think they were underweight, and as it happens, you were only 3 seconds behind Alain Prost, so you almost could have had an extra victory to your 5.
Yes, that's the story of my life, isn't it?
Well, after the race, De Cesaris, Briard, Eric Bernard and Philippe Alliot. 3 Frenchmen and 1 Italian.
Looks like Mr. Dalmas is the next one to be gobbled up by Ayrton Senna, and that relentless pace that he is able to maintain, he is, I think, probably the fittest of any Grand Prix driver. He's got not just fit physically but fit mentally.
John, I'd never seen anybody wave somebody by with quite such a spectacular arm movement as that. Dalmas had his hand completely out of the cockpit.
I think very sensible of him. At least it shows that some drivers do use their mirrors, and of course when you see a red and white McLaren coming up behind you, you do not want to be the person that gets in its way or might hold it up in any form or other. So well done Dalmas for being observant and letting Senna get through without impeding his race pace. He has got, remember, Thierry Boutsen not that far behind him, so being held up in 1 or 2 corners could have caused Boutsen to close that gap by maybe a second or more.
Yannick Dalmas was hailed as something as a new Alain Prost at one stage, but his career then took a dip, and a little lucky to stay in Grand Prix racing, Yannick Dalmas. Over in the pits, the teams are preparing for pit stops. Now, whether that is purely in case there is excessive wear or whether it's planned, we don't know. They usually play it pretty close to the chest.
Yes, but most of the teams, certainly, there we have Wojtek out of the race. Most of the teams at this stage of the race will be preparing for a pit stop. They may not have planned it, but they certainly will be prepared for it. The tyres will be sitting there. The 4 tyres that are to go onto the car will have these tyre warmers. It's like a tyre warmer is just like a glove. You put gloves on to keep your hand warm. They put these tyre warmers on to get the tyres up to the operating temperature. So they will be sitting in place, and if the driver feels he needs to come in to change a tyre, or all 4 tyres for that matter, he will indicate that to the pits by this 2-way radio, and then the team will be prepared for him to come in. It's pretty unusual for a driver just suddenly to dive off into the pits without any warning to the team. It has happened, but in a team like McLaren, it's a very unusual occurrence.
The gap, as you saw on that caption now, almost 5 seconds between Ayrton Senna commanding the race, 5 seconds ahead of Thierry Boutsen in the Williams Renault. Senna certainly the master so far in this race. Tremendous reliability, in fact, over the past couple of seasons for McLaren-Honda. Saw the V10 blow up a couple of times last year, John, in Canada, just a couple of laps from the end, of course.
Yes, and in Monza also. I mean, that was I think the most spectacular blow-up I saw when he coming into the famous Parabolica, the engine just let go, and a really brilliant race by Senna was ended up in the pits with an engine minus about 2 of its cylinders.
Well, there's a Ferrari. I think it's Alain Prost just lapping Nannini on that helicopter shot.
We really are seeing the superiority today of these V10 and V12 engines over the venerable now V8 Fords and Judds, the extra horsepower and the extra sophistication really that these multi-cylinder engines are providing are just really making a mockery of the grid below 7th or 6th place.
Alain Prost in 3rd place, closing on Thierry Boutsen. And somebody else just crawling into the pits, looked like a Brabham, might have been a Tyrrell, difficult to tell from that high up. And quite a lot of lappery going on now. That's Barilla just being lapped by Alain Prost.
He got through very nicely there. That was again a point in the track where Prost could have lost maybe 2 seconds and allowed Berger to get back up on his gearbox, but Barilla let him go through, and let's see, yes, Berger's able to get past quite cleanly.
Well, I suspected that Gerhard Berger had some problems perhaps with his tyres, but he has certainly held on to Alain Prost.
Yes, I think maybe in the early laps when Berger was obviously pressing very hard indeed, sometimes you can just take the edge off your tyres, and there we see Andrea de Chau. Yes, he's done it again. Andreas had a little spin, quite harmless this time, nobody else involved. But you can, in the early stages of a race, drive too hard and you can just take that edge off the tyres, but by backing off and just giving the car maybe 5 or 6 laps to let the tyre cool down and recover, you may well be able to continue without having to make a pit stop, and that, I suspect, is what happened to Berger.
Yes, Alain Prost has won the Brazilian Grand Prix 5 times, all of them, of course, in Rio. Last year's winner, Nigel Mansell. He was no more surprised, he was particularly surprised at that victory. Didn't expect the Ferrari to last. Much more reliable these days, particularly in the transmission department. Lap 26 of the 71 on Eurosport's flag-to-flag coverage. And there we see another spinner. That's Aligier off.
Yeah, I think that's Philippe Alliot.
Yeah, that was definitely Alliot. Now the computer graphics showing us the relative positions of the leading 4 cars.
I suspect that Berger is now looking to challenge Prost for that 3rd spot, and the one place that he would probably, I think, attempt to do it is coming past the pits, the very spot that Prost did pass Berger.
They got Thierry Boutsen in their sights as well, the blue flag waves.
Let's just watch Berger to see if he can get a really good run at Prost up the hill. The Honda engine does have that little bit more horsepower than the Ferrari, but is he I don't think he's going to be close enough this time to seriously threaten Prost.
At 27 of the 71. 4 Brazilians currently racing at Grand Prix level. Only 2 of them made it into today's race. Remember, Mauricio Gugelmin and, of course, Roberto Moreno failed to pre-qualify, sadly. Quite a lot of young Brazilians coming up, John. Gil de Ferran driving for Paul Stewart Racing. Here's a pass.
Oh, dear me. Cafe did not do what he should have done. He didn't he did actually finally let Prost get through cleanly, but in those situations when a driver is running so far down the field and the leading bunch are coming through, really the responsibility is on that slower car to make room for the leading cars to get through. He did it very well with Berger, but Probably Prost was cursing something in French under his helmet just for those few seconds that he was getting slightly balked.
Alex Caffey had a good season with Dallara. He was keen to move to a British team. And of course he's looking forward to Porsche power in the Arrows. Maybe before the end of the season. Suggestions that the last couple of races that Porsche will be ready with their engine, which has been financed by the Japanese Footwork Corporation. Just as TAG helped the Porsche engine that powered you along in a McLaren, John.
Yes, only too briefly I have to say, but I'm sure when Porsche produced their 3.5 litre V12 engine, if it is anything like as successful, here we have
Mansell in the pits.
Slow pit stop right front.
Problem for Nigel Mansell, he had been in 5th place. Oh.
He's getting out of the car. Now maybe he's got the problem with the gear change, because the gear change buttons are on the steering wheel.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it was.
Yep, they had to change the steering wheel. Maybe the connections on the wheel on the car was not operating properly, so they changed steering wheels and gave him a new one, and of course now he can change gear again. It's one of the drawbacks of the semi-automatic gearbox the Ferrari runs. It is controlled by the electronics on the car, and if anything goes down electronic-wise, then there is no gearbox use on the car whatsoever.
We lost maybe 15 or 20 seconds there. Slipped to 6th place, maybe 7th. We'll see it on the computer screen in just a moment. Riccardo Patrese moves up to 5th spot. There's Prost. Put in the fastest lap, 1:21.130.
Just coming up behind Martin Donnelly in the Lotus Lamborghini.
Yeah, they're in fact Mansell out of the top 6 now. Senna, Boutsen, 3rd Prost, 4th Berger, 5th it's Patrese, and in 6th place John Alesi. That's a good drive from him. In fact, Senna lapped everyone apart from the top 10 now. Thrusting drive by the Sao Paulo kid. 1.8 between Piquet and Alesi, 6th and 7th. And Nigel Mansell dropped to 9th place after that pit stop. Just look at that huge crowd. Motor racing's been popular in Brazil for 20 years or so. Egged on, of course, by Emerson Fittipaldi, still a great racer. Emerson Fittipaldi racing in Indy cars in America, the reigning kart champion, the Indy 500 winner. And in fact, his nephew, Christian Fittipaldi, making his Formula 3 debut in Britain, I think, next week. The son of Wilson Fittipaldi, who also raced in Formula 1 for Brabham. Alain Prost lapping the Ligier.
So this is the stage of the race where those people that are good in traffic, and of course Senna we know is terrific in traffic, can make up not only just time but places. We have to really rely very much on the car being lapped to assist this leading group going through, but on certain parts of the circuit it is difficult, and particularly if you've got a group of 2 or 3 cars and you're involved in the battle, you do sometimes forget that there's a motor race going on around you. You tend to focus just on what's happening in your particular little world, so it does require a lot of observation and use of the flag marshals around the circuit.
So Ayrton Senna still leads here. You're live to live, flag to flag coverage. Stay with us.
Your tactics and say, well, I'll go in on the next lap, because there's no point in trying to pass him. That's irrelevant. Get into the pits quick, make a good stop. You can get out ahead when he's made his stop and still be ahead without actually having to pass him on the road, and that's a much easier way of doing it. That looks like one of the Williams. That's Boutsen in the pits.
Yes, Thierry Boutsen in the pits, and that means to say that Alain Prost will now be up into second place, and it looks to me as though just as Mansell's stop was a long one, so is Boutsen's. He's having the nose changed. You're looking at the nose of the car through the on-car camera just behind Thierry Boutsen's head, and of course this is absolutely tragic for the Belgian.
Yes, whatever it is, it's not a routine stop because he came, by the way he came in. I was thinking it was a tyre stop, and I was just about to say when Murray finished that he came in rather a messy way, but obviously there's something more terminal around the front end of the car, and I have a suspicion it might be something to do with the brakes. All the hydraulic systems around there, and a new fastest lap for Ayrton Senna, and they're really just chipping away at this fastest lap. There's nobody going quicker by leaps and bounds, but what a tragic situation for the Williams team and for Boutsen, because that...
You're back, and there you see, accelerating out of the pits, Thierry Boutsen. He has lost second place. He had a major problem, or he very nearly had a mechanic as he accelerated out of the
Ferrari
pits.
mechanics were standing just in his part of the road he wanted, and he had to leap quickly to get out of the way. That was a very, very unfortunate stop for Boutsen. He had to change the front nose, and it took a very long time for that to be accomplished.
Yes, I wonder why they changed the nose. It looked as he came in that it was a scheduled stop, and then suddenly there was some work going on.
Oh, that's what happened. He hit a rear wheel. He came into the pits, and one of the rear wheels of another team hit the front of the car, and that was the reason why he had to do it.
While all that was going on, John, Alain Prost has been in the pits for a quick stop. Ayrton Senna still leads. Lap 32 of the 71. Gerhard Berger up to second place briefly. Here we see from Thierry Boutsen's car, no apparent problems. Super shots from the camera car, just see the changes of elevation in this racetrack. Senna leads Berger now. Tracy in third place. Nelson Piquet moving up the field also. He hasn't made a pit stop yet.
Piquet and Alain are really, I think Alain's tyres look like they're starting to give up the ghost because Piquet's all over him. But Alain is protecting his flank pretty well, but we'll have to see whether Piquet can actually find a way past this young Frenchman. He's quite an amazing guy. He's so competitive at giving up a spot. Here we see Piquet getting a run at him now, coming up past the pits, but I don't think he's going to be far enough ahead to get past.
There's Berger up to second spot. Piquet a lazy scrap for fourth. Let's just check up on the positions. Senna leads, Berger second, Prost is third, Patrese fourth, and we see an overtaking manoeuvre.
Yes, Piquet has just struggled through the inside of Alain at the end of the rear straight, and I can expect to see him now pulling away quite comfortably, because I'm sure Alain is going to be making a pit stop very shortly to change his Pirelli tyres. He was losing time in those last few laps. You could see the car wasn't working as well as it had done earlier in the race, but Nelson Piquet's got through and will very quickly open up a gap between himself and Alain.
New fastest lap, and indeed a lap record to Thierry Boutsen, down into the 1:20s now. Senna making his pit stop out of the camera's sight. Ayrton Senna coming into the pits, gives Gerhard Berger the lead. There's Berger. John, the Goodyear technicians were saying before the race that they didn't expect pit stops, but it's all happening now.
Well, they weren't expecting pit stops based on the kind of weather that we had on Friday, Thursday and Friday, where it was actually quite cool. But race day has been much warmer, and of course this racetrack at Interlagos tends to get very, very sticky, on top of which we've got a brand new surface, so there's not really a great deal of history for the tyre companies to refer back to. So it was very much a case, I think, of sort of licking your finger and seeing where the wind was coming from.
Senna very quickly back on the racetrack after his fresh set of tyres, and that's Minardi sliding off.
No, it's not. That's Riccardo Patrese in the Williams.
My goodness me, Riccardo Patrese making an error. They're pretty rare. Senna across the start-finish line again. The crowd rises.
Gerhard Berger rejoining the race now after his pit stop for tyres.
Lap 35 of the 71. Senna back in the lead after the Berger pit stop. So all the positions are shuffled round quite a lot on the lap chart, but now the race taking up the form that we saw, the running order we saw before those pit stops, apart from the fact, of course, that Mansell, John, lost that time in that disastrous pit stop, and Boutsen, of course, had his problem with the that we saw, that problem when he accelerated out of the pits and hit a wheel that was being held by a mechanic and had to make another pit stop to get the nose replaced. All this has done great things for the chances of Jean Alesi, and of course Nelson Piquet having an excellent run.
Yes, Piquet I think really must feel some form of inspiration, although São Paulo is not his hometown. He was born and brought up in Brasilia. He is still Brazilian, and to do well here, plus the fact that Senna really is the Brazilian crowd's favourite driver these days, he would like to still tell the fans that I can still race, I can still do a good job, you know, don't forget about me.
He's certainly doing that. There is Senna, that man of total dedication. Used to relax with model aircraft a few years ago when he lived in England, and flew model helicopters as well, and that's no easy thing.
It is said that flying a model helicopter is more difficult than the real thing, but I'm sure if Senna decided to fly the real thing, he would find it came to him fairly easily.
A few helicopter pilots amongst the Grand Prix brigade, John.
Yes.
Jonathan Palmer, of course, is the test driver for McLaren these days, raced for Tyrrell last season. He's a dab hand at the controls of a helicopter. I think Nigel Mansell's got a helicopter license as well.
A few of the drivers, they get, it's just an extension of the toy factor, I think, that if one driver does something such as flying an aircraft or flying a helicopter, then they all want to jump on that same bandwagon, and some of them have done it successfully, others I think have tried and retired quietly and not said much more about it than that.
Mansell in 7th place, Senna leads from Prost, Patrese, Berger, Piquet and Alesi. Just coming up to half distance. Senna, blast past Gianni Morbidelli. There's Gianni Morbidelli, whose father built World Championship winning motorcycles 10 years ago, dominated the 125 and also the 50cc categories for a while. Nelson Piquet into the pits. It's a scheduled one. Gets a wipe of his visor.
And that looks to be just about the quickest of the pit stops we've seen so far. Good pit stop for Piquet and Benetton.
So just past the half distance mark. The race has been led throughout by Ayrton Senna, apart from when he made his pit stop, when his teammate Gerhard Berger was in the lead for just a couple of laps. Now he has a Ligier to lap. Nicola Larini.
looks very much in control of the situation now. He's driving with total ease and consistency. There's no pressure on him at all, and he's able to drive and use the racetrack as he chooses, which is a very nice situation for any driver to be in. And in fact, as hard as it is driving a Grand Prix car when things are going this well for you, in the car itself it all seems relatively easy, and it's as opposed to running second or fifth or 18th, whatever, when it's usually a major struggle and a battle to achieve that position.
Senna, 12 seconds lead over his teammate, and Nigel Mansell coming back into the top 6. John, would like just to talk very quickly about Mauricio Gugelmin, who isn't in this race, finished 3rd last year, failed to qualify. That can't be the driver. How much of the combination is the driver?
Well, in Brazil last year, the Leighton House team ran their 88 car. They introduced their 89 car at Monaco last year, and really from that point onwards, the Leighton House team has been on a downward spiral, and they've got a car that is very sophisticated indeed, but it's also a very, very small car, very difficult to work on, and the problem is that the team haven't been able to translate the work that they've done in the wind tunnel and the performance the car has theoretically onto the racetrack. And of course the two drivers, Ivan Capelli and Maurizio Gugelmin, are really suffering as a consequence. Whether a more experienced driver such as Alain Prost we're watching here, if he was in the Leighton House team, would be able to contribute more through his experience. 10 years in Grand Prix racing is a lot of motor racing experience. Whether that is what the team needs or not, the team themselves don't even really know. They are, I think, very, very disappointed and frustrated with the situation that they're currently in.
Because we have seen drivers drag teams up from the doldrums. Niki Lauda at Ferrari, a perfect example.
Absolutely. I mean, Niki Lauda went to Ferrari in the 1974 season, and he and the team manager at that time, Luca Montezemola, brought that team back from being a middle-of-the-grid team to a front-running team, and then winning the championship 75.
Just out of the top 6, Martini at 7th, Modena 8th. Terry Boutsen now down in 10th spot. Terry Boutsen so long in 2nd position, down in 10th spot. There's Alain Prost. Haven't seen much of Nigel Mansell in this coverage so far. Alain Prost 2nd. As competitive as Alain, will he be happy with 2nd place with Ferrari, or will he be just upset that he isn't winning it?
Alain takes the long-term view. I think he's done so for quite a long time in his Grand Prix career, and Senna's looks like the front wing, the right front wing in his car is off, and he is about to come into the pits. He's run into the back of one of the Tyrrells. Yes, you can see he's going to make a pit stop for the nose, and that is actually maybe a lot worse than just the nose cone. We have to wait now and see what's going to happen to Ayrton Senna. Here he coming into the pit lane. What a disaster.
As we said, there does seem to be a jinx on Ayrton Senna winning his home Grand Prix. What's going to happen now? This will take at least 20-25 seconds, John.
Well, they've got to unscrew the nose. It's not on quick fasteners. There are little bolts. They've got to undo those. They got the old nose off, what was left of it, but fitting the new one. Had the mounting points to that nose been damaged. What a disaster. What an awful thing to happen. And why, when you had such a comfortable lead, why not just give the guy who's ahead of you, looked like one of the Brabhams, the benefit of the doubt and let him go 24 seconds plus the time lost on the track and coming in and out of the pits. And Alain Prost is now leading the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Yes, in only his 2nd drive with Ferrari, Alain Prost, the man who's won the Brazilian Grand Prix 5 times, leads the Brazilian Grand Prix. And could we see the race of his life from Ayrton Senna now? Senna will be egged on by the whole of Brazil, by this huge crowd at Interlagos, by the 125 million Brazilians, many who are glued to their television sets.
But Andrew, that pit stop of Senna's probably in total cost him maybe 40 to 50 seconds. Not just the time lost in the pits, the time lost coming into the pit, in the pit lane itself, then exiting the pit. So to try and make up that amount of deficit on someone like Alain Prost, who is now really inherited the lead as a Brabham.
That's Modena, I think.
Modena, yes. really is a very, I can't conceive that Senna can take that amount of time out of Alain Prost. We're over half distance in the race, and all Prost has got to do now is just sit there and avoid the very situation that we saw Senna get himself into. I still do not understand why Ayrton Senna put himself in the position of sticking his nose under the right rear of one of those Tyrrells.
.4 seconds between the leader Alain Prost and Gerhard Berger. There you see the gap exactly, 4.489 seconds. Senna 31 seconds behind Alain Prost, with a lot of work to do. So there we see now Prost, Berger, Senna, Mansell up to 4th, Patrese 5th, Alesi 6th. 4.4 seconds between Prost and Berger. Any chance, John, do you think of him doing it?
I think there's more chance of Gerhard Berger, having now seen his teammate have to make that pit stop. There's now a chance for Berger to win the race. I suspect that when he was running third with Prost between him and his teammate, he wasn't too interested in challenging for the lead, but now there's a very good reason for him to do so. 4.4 seconds is realistic. I don't think 30 seconds with less than 30 laps to go is anything like realistic. It's over a second a lap he would have to take out of Alain Prost, and at this point I would have thought if he could do that, it would be the greatest victory I'll have ever witnessed, and probably Senna's greatest victory if he could do it.
That assumes, of course, that this car stays in one piece, that doesn't have any of the gremlins that have beset the Ferraris over the past couple of years. And Senna immediately putting in a new fastest lap of 1 minute 20.067, very nearly down into the 119s, 194 kilometres an hour, 120 miles per hour average round the 2.5 mile Interlagos circuit. There is Prost in the lead.
It's at this stage in the race that the teamwork now will really come into play. The Ferrari pitch will be giving Prost all the information about first Berger, but second Ayrton Senna, and Alain Prost is more than capable of gauging the speed he has to run at to ensure that Berger doesn't get close enough to have a go at him, but really that Senna's charge, and he is charging right now, is not going to affect his chances of winning the race.
So there is Senna in third place, Nigel Mansell behind him in 4th position. Two McLarens and two Ferraris. So the Brazilian Grand Prix has really come alive. Senna in third place, chasing hard after Alain Prost and Gerhard Berger. Just 4 seconds between the leading pair. This is lap 44 of the 71. Can Ayrton Senna catch up that difference? Stay with us on Eurosport. We'll be back after these messages.
Di guida di Senna, al di là di quegli errori che capitano ogni tanto, bisogna però dire che il campionato di quest'anno si presenta più combattuto.
È ovvio, adesso è ovvio che Ferrari è meglio, molto meglio dell'anno scorso, e si presenta un campionato più combattuto, no? Meglio per tutti gli spettatori.
Prost, Berger, Senna, Patrese, Mansell, Alesi, Martini, Bustani e Piquet, quindi decimo Nakajima, poi Nannini, Donnelly, Larini, Alliot e Caffi. Prost gira in 1.20.384, Berger in 1.20.810, perde altri 4 decimi ed è a 6 secondi e 247 da Prost. Aspettiamo Senna. Eccolo, si sta avvicinando al traguardo. Passa
davanti al box.
In questo momento a 26 secondi e 4 sì, ha perso un altro mezzo secondo su Berger.
Comincia a perdere sopra di Berger, ovviamente sopra di Prost.
Secondo te perché sta perdendo?
Dovrebbe essere che comincia a tirare molto, diciamo, stato colpito da questa situazione e non guida così come guidava prima guidava più tranquillo. Adesso
non può essere che quella botta abbia in qualche modo alterato il musetto?
hanno messo il musetto lo stesso, ha fatto...
Berger, Senna the order at the moment. Senna tripped up by a slower car, had to come into the pits, get a new nose. In fact, Senna seems to be falling back a little bit on Gerhard Berger. 6 seconds now between Prost and Berger. Patrese in 4th spot. John, what about Senna's chances now? It just seems to be slipping back a little bit. Do you think he's got a problem? Maybe damaged the front suspension a little bit in that
It's
that
possible,
touch?
yes, it's possible in that shunt. The nose was fairly well shredded by the time he got into the pits. It looked like it wasn't just the nose that hit the back of the Tyrrell, it was possibly the left front wheel that may have done so also. So the car and its handling may not be quite as exact as it was at the start of the race. But mainly, I would say, he had a pit stop for tyres, he went back out, so his tyres are not fresh. And it may have just been that one quick lap with his whole adrenaline was flowing so fast that he got on the pace very, very quickly. But really now I would imagine that 3rd place is the most realistic place that Ayrton Senna is going to have today, unless either Prost or Berger have some form of mechanical problem, or they also get tangled with one of the slower cars on the track.
So we cap on the order, Prost and Berger, Senna 3rd. Just 3.4 seconds behind now is Patrese in 4th position. 5th Mansell, 6th Alesi, 7th Martini, 8th Boutsen, 9th Piquet. The rest have been lapped. So interesting situation now with Patrese pushing hard after Senna. See Patrese spin off the course. But certainly charging hard now. Started off the 2nd row of the grid. Riccardo Patrese, the most experienced man in Grand Prix racing. Little racer this year, live on Eurosport. You will see him drive in his 200th Grand Prix. And just 2 victories to his credit in that period of time. Senna sweeps round another back marker. Past the Ligier. Lap 47 of the 71. Beautiful engine note that V10 Honda.
Yes, it's an amazing engine. The fact that they can make an engine that is inherently and unbalanced, the vibrations that an engine of that configuration one would expect to make with the design of the engine, it's as sweet as a nut. I mean, it's a superb engine. It's fantastic. In fact, there's even talk of an engine of that style being eventually fitted into a road car. So V10 engines and odd sort of configurations of engines are going to be something we're going to see even being applied to road use. And that's really why Honda are in the business of going motor racing, is to develop things that ordinarily one would not expect to see in a road car. And on a racetrack, that development time is dramatically reduced.
Terry Boutsen moved up a spot, up to 7th place. There's Gerhard Berger. Just while we're watching Gerhard, John, people should be reminded, of course, that your racing career is far from over. You're now in World Championship Sports Car Racing, driving for Toyota. You've had a little testing lately.
We had a little bit of testing at Silverstone recently, my first time in the car for the last 5 months, so I'm delighted to report that the skill is still there.
Ayrton Senna now, according to the timing screen, seems to be gaining a little bit on Alain Prost. Prost probably backing off a little bit. Now he's got a secure lead over Gerhard Berger. 9.7 seconds between Alain Prost and Gerhard Berger. And there you see the gap, Senna to Berger, 24.098 seconds. Second to third, that gap.
Berger's coming up to pass the man we suspect was the one that Senna tangled with, Nakajima in the Tyrrell.
We've seen very little of Nakajima in this race. Had a very good drive in Phoenix. Finished in the top 6, of course. fact, in that shot you can see a little bit of the old circuit.
The reason that they had to change the circuit as dramatically as they did from the old circuit was that the perimeter circuit, there's no space left for any runoff area, and today's circuits have got to have lots and lots of runoff area, especially in very fast corners. So the only way that they could make the circuit fit into the new regulations was for it to, in fact, to shrink instead of expand. So they've actually gone inside here, particularly coming onto the straight. They've gone inside the old circuit to give the cars a much wider runoff area in the event of a car having a problem or mechanical failure.
Berger to Senna, 23 seconds now. Gerhard Berger lying in second place. Comes up to Alex Gaffey.
PK having another pit stop. The tyres.
Nelson had been in ninth place, that drops him further down the field. Gerhard Berger from Wörgl in Austria. Family have a haulage business. And Gerhard's a very keen skiing man, John. In fact, he's got a manager who also manages some of the Austrian ski team. There you see the gap, 21 seconds between Berger and Senna.
Yeah, Gerhard is a very keen skier. In fact, when he joined McLaren, I think the idea of being able to not ski, but certainly go to ski events such as the Hahnenkamm in Kitzbühel this year, he was all set to go to that, and then suddenly he got a little note from his team boss Ron Dennis saying that he would be required in Japan for 3 days testing at the Suzuka circuit with Honda. And that's the kind of commitment you make to McLaren when you go to drive for that team. Forget about your ski holidays. If there's testing to do, that comes first.
Of course, Senna did very little testing over the winter period, decided to go for a rest instead, and that was all agreed with the McLaren team, and it seems to have done him a world of good, in fact.
Well, I think there were a number of factors that contributed to him not being in the car so much. Really, the whole Senna-Valestra-Fisa affair. I think while that was going on, it was probably advisable to let Senna have those few months of rest to allow himself to feel that he wants to come back and be a Grand Prix driver, really.
Gerhard's neck seems to be bobbing around a little bit in the cockpit this late stage in the race, John.
I don't think that's a problem. I think the circuit in some parts is slightly bumpy, and of course the cars are generally running extremely stiff springs, so any little bump irregularity on the racetrack will make a driver's head wobble round. But also, again, going back to this thing of driver fitness, this is the first real Grand Prix of the year. Phoenix wasn't a Grand Prix in the sense of the high G loads that a driver's subjected to, but here in Interlagos you are getting high G forces, so your neck's getting tired, and as a result the control of your neck muscles is diminishing. So look at him going over the bump there, going backwards and forwards as well as side to side. So maybe all the drivers are going to be feeling a little bit tender by the time they've completed these 71 laps of the Interlagos racetrack.
Look, 11 seconds there between Prost and Berger, and Senna now 31 seconds behind Alain Prost. Tracy Mansell very close for fourth place, and then Alessi in the top six again. So really Senna has made very little progress on Alain Prost, just about 30 seconds. I think it was 33 after that pit stop. That's 52 of the 71 run.
Yes, I think the prospect of Senna, if he could have made up any of that time, would have been quite remarkable. But here we are with Thierry Boutsen behind one of the Tyrrells.
Here's Thierry Boutsen, one of the drivers who bases himself in Monaco. It's a long break in the Grand Prix schedule after this race. Back to Europe, and of course the scene will shift to the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola. And there'll be a lot of hard work going on, John. Teams really have got a month to assess what's gone on in the first two races, and some of them even bring along their 1990 cars.
Yeah, I would expect that every single team that's racing here today will be getting their transporters ready to go down to Imola for a lot of very intensive testing. I think the season started, it didn't catch people wrong-footed, but a lot of people had very disruptive winters. Certainly the Onyx team, the Brabham team, had lots of problems which had nothing to do with being going motor racing. March have got a major problem. The Leighton House car has got a major problem with its the whole package. There's something fundamentally wrong there. Even McLaren themselves are not totally satisfied with this new car. They feel that they're racing it and it's maybe running at about 80% of its true potential. So I think it's almost going to be like 2 weeks of Grand Prix non-stop down at Imola between now and the Grand Prix in May.
Prost to Berger, 10.3 seconds now. Berger chipping away at that gap. 11 seconds just a couple of laps ago. Now it's 10.3. There is Gerhard giving it the big go. The car now running light on fuel. Can you actually feel a difference in the car, John, as the fuel diminishes? Does it get a little lighter on the steering at all?
Not really. These days, the modern Formula One car is a very, very well thought out piece of equipment, and if you do feel a difference between empty and full, it shouldn't be a difference that you feel in the handling of the car. It should only be in that the car is a little bit more responsive. It might accelerate marginally quicker, and also it might be able to brake a little bit later. Weight is the big penalty of fuel. You're carrying close to 40 gallons of fuel, almost 300 pounds weight. So as that fuel reduces, it's not a very obvious thing, it's a more gradual effect.
Just saw a Minardi going into the pits then, couldn't catch who it was. What about cockpit adjustments? Because 4 or 5 years ago there used to be quite a lot of levers and things that the drivers altered. The roll bars used to be cockpit adjustable. A lot of that isn't used now, is it?
Some teams do, some teams don't. A lot of the adjustments today are more to do with the engine and adjusting the mixture of the engine, and particularly in the turbo days they had also turbo boost to adjust. The biggest thing they may consider doing is on a rear roll bar to prevent the car, this change of fuel when the car is lightening up. The way you want to have the car in the early part of the race may change as the race goes through. Normally it's not such a big thing, but in a circuit like this where teams don't have the knowledge of the racetrack or of the track surface, it may be an advantage to be able to adjust that rear roll bar and therefore control the handling of the car to your preference.
Nigel Mansell having a big go, just 0.3 of a second behind Riccardo Patrese. There's Alessandro Nannini, not a happy race for him. In fact, the two Benettons running together. Nelson we saw making that second pit stop. There's Nannini. Senna passes him. Alain Prost still leads, looking for his 40th Grand Prix victory. It'll be an all-time record. He overtook Jackie Stewart's record, of course, some year or so ago. I think it'll be a particularly sweet victory for Alain Prost, having switched from McLaren and basically fallen out with Ron Dennis in the process and joined Ferrari. And also, of course, Steve Nichols has joined Ferrari from McLaren. One of the top engineer designers from the team. Senna on the power again. Prost to Berger, 11 seconds, then 19 seconds to Senna. So little movement there, very little movement there. Prost, I think, John, controlled in the race now, probably as he would like.
Yes, he's got a sufficient lead on Berger that he can now really control the race very much from the front, and I think the outcome of this race is being predetermined by the drivers and by the pits. They're getting the information as to who is doing what, and Prost does seem to have such a control on the race. His lead is substantial enough. It's that kind of lead that's depressing for Berger. He's in second place.
Fastest lap just then.
Yes, he got the quickest lap, but he just sees that lead that Prost has is getting further and further away from him, and of course psychologically that's a very difficult thing for a driver to live with, to know that you're trying as hard as you can, yet the driver ahead of you is still pulling away. And I would imagine that Gerhard Berger is counting on 6 points from this race rather than attempting to find the extra 3 and make his total in 1990 up to 9.
You're talking about changing the setup of the car from the cockpit. What about the brake balance? Because that's something you didn't mention. Most of these cars do have a knob which they can twiddle to change the balance of the brakes from front to rear.
again, with the kind of brakes that these cars are using, they're not using a conventional steel disc like the normal road car we have today is fitted with. The cars have got carbon fiber discs also. The brake system is a very, very sophisticated part of these cars. They do have an adjustment in the cockpit. Some drivers may choose to use it, but really, once you have set up your car in the qualifying and practice and you've established really what you want, there shouldn't be a great deal of need to change the brake balance in the race. Some people might like to do it. Some people are just perennial fiddlers, but others will probably set it up and leave it there for the whole race.
Well, obviously a few problems with the cameras, but we're back. Just saw that overhead view of the circuit of Interlagos, and there is Ayrton Senna.
And he's catching up to the man I think was responsible or involved, let's say not responsible, in that little contretemps that caused Senna to lose his nose.
Yes, changed the whole face of the race. We think it was Satoru Nakajima. Two Japanese drivers started the race. Nakajima and Aguri Suzuki, who spent a fruitless season last year with Zach Speed, with the Yamaha power.
And I saw a hand coming out of the cockpit there in the Tyrrell, sort of making signs. I'm going to let you go through this time. Wasn't my fault the last time either. No, I think that was unquestionably the other car involved in that Senna Tyrrell incident, and Mr. Nakajima was doing everything possible, humanly possible, to enable Senna to get through unhindered this time. But I must say, I think that Senna was a little bit rash in trying to pass Nakajima at that part of the circuit when he did. He really has thrown the race away this time by his own misjudgments.
Because we saw that in the Italian Grand Prix, didn't we, year before last, when Jean-Louis Schlesser, guesting in the Williams, well, got trapped or hit by Senna just 2 or 3 laps from the end at the chicane, and that, of course, was a sensational happening, because it meant that McLaren couldn't clean sweep the whole season.
Alain Prost has gone through in the same spot, and we're getting a little bit better response from some of the slower cars now. They are using their mirrors. But this problem of passing slower cars, one of the problems is that you have to appreciate that the guy in the car ahead of you may not actually have seen you. There's no point assuming that he has and that he's going to make room for you. You have to be clear in your mind that either he sees you or you make him see you. And by making somebody see you, you really drive up to the person and put yourself really in his rearview mirrors, so that there's no question that you are there.
Top 4, Prost, Berger, Senna, Patrese, but Nigel Mansell just 0.2 of a second behind Riccardo Patrese, trying to find a way round him. We can't see it on our pictures, but I can assure you that Nigel Mansell is pressing Riccardo Patrese extremely hard for 4th position at the front. 12.1 seconds between Prost and Berger.
I think Gerhardt reckons those 6 points are looking quite handsome right now. Got 12 laps to go, and there's not much prospect of that lead now altering. The only thing can happen is something untoward, unexpected, electronically or mechanically, with Prost. Ferrari being such a wily competitor as Alain Prost is, he doesn't have a reputation as being the greatest overtaker today on the Grand Prix circuit. But in this kind of situation, that's the kind of help that really he's looking for. He doesn't want to go diving down the inside of people. He just is prepared to sit back, and if he gets held up in one corner, well, he'll get held up, and hopefully will make it up in the next short or long straight that comes along.
Well, the gap has closed just a tiny bit. 18 seconds now between Senna and Berger. 13 seconds between Prost and Berger. This is the 59th lap. There's Terry Boutsen. Quick spot that, John.
Yes, I think what he was doing, his helmet visor, he may have been opening it slightly just to get a little bit of air in. He certainly was fiddling around the front of the visor to do something. Coming up the hill into this quite tricky double right-hand corner with a nasty bump on the exit. What this camera angle does is show you how much elevation there is on the circuit, whereas the high-mounted cameras tend to make everything look rather flat. And this corner is a downhill left-hand corner. Has always been difficult 20 years ago. back down to first gear, slow, then quickly take the second gear. Down to third for the corner onto the straight. Back on the power, fourth gear, fifth, into sixth gear.
Let's recap the top six: Prost, Berger, Senna, Patrese, Mansell and Boutsen. There you see, we just lost him now. Boutsen has passed Alain up to sixth spot. .6 seconds now between second and third spot. Berger to Patrese. Senna rather. Here's Alain Prost. Started off the third row of the grid. Actually pulling away from Berger, the gap 14.2 seconds.
I suspect that's really not a matter of Prost going faster, but Berger is dropping back now. I can't believe that Prost is actually trying to pull away from Berger at this point in the race. Really all he will do is maintain a pace which is comfortable for him, is gentle on the car, and leave the rest to his competitors.
Be a little surprised by Prost's decision to move to Ferrari. A move I think that a lot of people thought wouldn't really pay off in this way, or certainly not so soon.
I think I'm surprised that it's paying off, maybe, let's say, as soon as this. I imagine that the change to Ferrari would have been maybe a little bit more progressive, certainly with Nigel Mansell in the team. Having Mansell as a teammate and having Ayrton Senna as a teammate, in terms of out-and-out speed, I wouldn't have thought there was very much difference between the two of them.
Prost leading Berger, Senna, Patrese, Mansell and Boutsen. Just a few laps left. Stay with us to see if Alain Prost can come home to his 40th win live on Eurosport.
La mentalità di Prost a questo momento c'è molto lui come forza adesso e nel confronto di Senna, della polemica, è molto, diciamo, molto motivato, no?
E soprattutto vuole dimostrare che è capace di andare veloce quanto e più di Senna, pur avendo una macchina che notoriamente in prova è leggermente inferiore.
Ma deve tu sapere sempre che è molto importante. La gente sempre ricorda la domenica, il sabato non si ricorda molto la qualifica, anche i libri scrivono la storia delle gare e finisce oggi domenica, no?
Conclude anche il 62esimo giro Prost in 1.20.808, sempre sotto l'1.21, aspettiamo Berger.
La Williams che fa un po' di
1.21.129.
La Williams di Patrese che fa un po' di fumo di olio, mi sembra, no?
Intanto Berger ha 14 secondi e 7 di distacco e adesso è il momento di Senna sul traguardo. Sentiamo il motore in distanza.
You're back live at Sao Paulo. Alain Prost leads Gerhard Berger. Senna is third, but the big news while you're away is we've seen Riccardo Patrese's Renault engine smoking quite badly. Patrese has to be in a question mark over him finishing the race. Nigel Mansell in fifth place, Boutsen sixth. John, just tell us about that smoke. You picked it up.
Yes, we just saw Patrese going past. There's that little wisp of the telltale blue smoke coming out of the rear of Patrese. You can see it. Look, he's going slowly. In fact, he's probably, I think, going to make his pit stop. If not at the end of this lap, it'll happen for him. So Patrese's race at this late stage in the event, yeah, that's pretty serious. And it looks like it's happening when he's coming around corners. It may be that something is surging in the engine oil. But Patrese, I suspect, is now preparing to enter to the pits at the end of this lap.
Well, that looks like bad news for the Williams team. Bad news for the Lotus team as well. Both Lotuses no longer in the action. Lap 64. Alain Prost in command. One moment changed the whole face of the race when Ayrton Senna, thrusting ever onwards, poked his nose down the inside of Satoru Nakajima as he lapped him. Nakajima apparently didn't see him and caused a lot of damage to the front of Senna's nose section, and he had to make that pit stop and lost 30 or 40 seconds. Senna has yet to win a Brazilian Grand Prix, and he will be, it appears, denied yet again here in front of a home crowd. Alain Prost has already won the Brazilian Grand Prix 5 times.
Greedy little fellow, isn't he? That's since 1980.
Of course, John, you know what it's like to have won your native Grand Prix. You won the British Grand Prix. That must have been a great feeling that day.
Yes, I think any driver who's privileged to win his home Grand Prix, it's something remarkable. I'll never forget those days in 1981 at Silverstone, and I think it's probably the strongest memory that I'll enjoy from my Grand Prix racing career, and I'm sure it's one that Ayrton Senna would love to have had here today, and really, had it not been for a slight bit of impatience on his part and overtaking a slower car, he could well have been enjoying that experience I did 9 years ago.
We're enjoying the experience of a live Brazilian Grand Prix, live on Eurosport, as will every Grand Prix be this season. Just 14 cars still running now. Interlagos has taken its toll. Across that little bump, obviously some drainage pipe put in through that section of the track. Some last minute patching. Through Bootson was saying to me a couple of weeks ago that it takes him a couple of days to recover from a race like this, and he's got bruises all over his legs and on his arms. Very, very physical driving these cars.
I would say that current Grand Prix cars, driving one of them in a Grand Prix of this distance on this type of circuit, you probably get out of a car very much the way a boxer would feel after a long bout. You get bashed around in the cockpit, your body really does take a pounding. You don't feel it at the time, of course, because the adrenaline is flowing so freely, and it absorbs any of the injuries. But as that adrenaline wears off, the following day, the next 2 days, your body really does show signs of a major sort of confrontation.
Across the start-finish line again. Those fans going to be disappointed. Tremendous enthusiasm for Grand Prix racing in Brazil.
It was one of the comments that President Balestra made this weekend. He made a shock appearance at the circuit, and he happened to mention that the last 2 times he came to Interlagos, a Frenchman happened to win the Grand Prix. They said, I'm not intending to have any bearing on the results this weekend, but I'd just like to point out that Frenchmen do win Grand Prix in Brazil when I'm there.
I'm sure it's all his doing, John. Williams now in 5th and 6th place. Mansell now in front of Patrese. Well, the order's shuffled around a bit, but the top 6 qualifying cars in the top 6 positions.
And I think that's how it's going to be for very much this 1990 season. And that's one team that has got maybe some potential, the Benetton, with the new Ford V8, which is probably the most powerful of the V8 engines racing in Grand Prix racing today.
Yes, designed by Cosworth exclusively for the Benetton team. Prost to Berger, 16.6 seconds. Berger to Senna, 14.8 seconds. Lap 67. Just as we're watching Ayrton Senna here, John, I think we ought to hand out a quick word of congratulations for another Irish racing driver, albeit from south of the border.
Derek Daly. one of the Ligiers must have been Larini. He just had a spin in front of Senna. Fortunately, Senna was well on top of the situation. He read it a long time before we saw it on the cameras, and he was able to go through the inside without any problem.
Well spotted. Just going back to Derek Daly, won the Sebring 12 Hours last week. Of course, drove for Williams, Ensign, a number of Formula One teams, and Derek Daly, his first victory since 1979. Amazing.
Yes, it is, and here's more problems. Martini getting in the way of Senna this time. This is the kind of situation that happens when 2 or 3 cars get grouped together. They're really just focusing on themselves and they forget about a quicker car behind, and Senna had to really say, look, I am here and I am going to pass you guys, please get out of my way.
Prost to Berger, 16.6 seconds. Berger to Senna, 14.8. There's the top 6, Prost, Berger, Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Boutsen.
Yes,
into
amazing.
the last 5 laps.
There's one of the Williamsons stuck in the pit lane. Riccardo Patrese, his race is now finally over.
Yes, delete Patrese from your top 6. Boutsen moves up to 5th place. And Jai Lacey up to 6th. So Lacey looks as if he's going to be in the points for a second race running.
And of course, Lacey has not made a pit stop. We haven't seen him coming into the pit stop, into the pits to take on fresh tyres. The strategy that Ken Tyrrell adopts to his racing is somewhat different sometimes to many of the other teams. And he's a great planner and strategist. And for Jean Lacey in this, really his first full season of Grand Prix racing, having that parental hand of Ken Tyrrell on his shoulders is going to give him a lot of useful experience come the day when Lacey is going to be the man that all the top teams are going to try and snap up.
There you see the computer graphic showing relative positions of the cars, and you see that Alain Prost really has a considerable lead now. Gerhard Berger will not be able to see him in front of him, might just catch a glimpse across the loop.
But that's only going to rub salt into his wounds, because seeing Prost across that loop means that he's only getting further and further away. So Berger really wouldn't want to have to look across the loop to see Prost. He just wants to get his Honda McLaren home in 2nd place and get his first points of the season in the bin.
After the race is over, John, that Senna will churn over in his mind what would have been and what he could have done differently?
Well, I think he has to, because at the time he had that little incident with Nakajima, he was comfortably in the lead. He wasn't under pressure. I don't believe that he had to make the move at that particular time, at that particular part of the circuit. And of course, we've seen in the past where Senna has relied too heavily on other drivers. And I think this is an area where he still obviously is not as complete as some of his other competitors are. It's a great shame, because he's such a great driver in every other respect.
Prost to Berger now, 16.8 seconds. Berger to Senna, 16 seconds. On the last 2 laps of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Just 14 laps running, 14 cars still going. Gianni Morbidelli still going at the back of the field.
And I think he'll have felt he's had a good workout today. Your first Grand Prix is always an experience, and of course at somewhere like this Carlos Pace circuit in São Paulo, it's as tough as a circuit as you're going to get. So when that little guy, and he's a small built driver, when he gets out of the car, they'll probably take his overalls and give them a good ringing, and he'll probably plop out somewhere through the leg or through an arm.
Nelson Piquet in 7th spot. After those 2 pit stops, he'll be disappointed. Not a good payday for him.
He's on points for his salary this year, isn't he?
That's right.
Amazing what a performance-related contract can do to a driver, or for that matter, do to a team.
to see Alain Prost now. Just a few corners between him and his 40th Grand Prix victory, but his very first in a scarlet red Ferrari. He won, of course, at Renault. He won most of his races at McLaren. And this is the battle for 6th place. Nelson going for that extra money, trying to get past Jean Alesi.
And Alesi kept the line on the corner well closed. This is going to be an interesting last aspect of the race, because Piquet, Alesi is a hard little competitor. He's still very young, but plenty tough.
Here he comes towards the flag. There's the checkered flag. It is unfurled, it is waved, and Alain Prost wins for Ferrari. Alain Prost the winner.
And what a happy little Frenchman I think he is. He's going to say that was one of my most pleasing victories.
Gerhard Berger, his first points for McLaren. Waiting now for Ayrton Senna to come to the line.
And Piquet's got through.
He's done it. Great stuff from Nelson Piquet. Senna to the line. Victory denied him. That will make a total of 13 points, put him at the head of the table, ahead of Alain Prost with 9. Alesi, Boutsen, Berger all have 6 points after this race.
And I'm sure Nelson Piquet's favourite song tonight is "I'm in the Money."
Well, I don't know what 1 point's worth, John. I think he's actually denied that.
It's probably about 10 years' salary to you and me.
Probably is. Well, me anyway, not you. Did hear the rumour of how much Toyota were paying you this year. Well, what about that as a race, John? Not the most exciting Brazilian Grand Prix we've seen, but an unexpected result. Some good action down the field. And the whole race turned with just that one incident.
Yes, it did, that one incident, I think. I just really... I'm still bewildered to understand why Ayrton Senna chose to try and pass in that particular part of the circuit with a car and a driver who wasn't aware of what was going on.
Confirmation there. Prost, Berger, Senna, Mansell, Boutsen, Piquet, and the Williams of Boutsen lapped on its way to 5th spot. Late retirement, of course, from the other Williams. And there you see Alain Prost going home. Confirmation of the World Championship points. Senna 13, Prost 9, Berger, Alesi, Boutsen all with 6, Piquet with 4. Ayrton Senna on top of the list. Could so easily have been 18 points.
You know, races, when they're not as easy as this race was, but when Senna had the lead like he did have, to give away those 5 points from being in first place to 3rd place is just unbelievable. And it's very, I mean, I'm just uncertain as to what was going through his mind at the time he chose to do that particular manoeuvre. I'm sure even Nakajima, who felt that he was quite right to do what he did, he didn't shut the door so tight, but he didn't certainly leave enough room for Senna to go through.
So we may just, of course, catch the post-race interviews. We're hoping to bring those to you if they're able to get to the drivers quick enough. You may well hear what Ayrton Senna's got to say about it all.
Well, he'll not be a happy boy, I can guarantee you that.
There is the podium, the trophies waiting. Let's have a look at the World Championship Constructors' points. McLaren-Honda 19, Ferrari 12, Tyrrell Ford 7, Williams Renault 6, Benetton Ford 4, and Brabham Judd 2 points. So familiar looking name at the top, but Tyrrell up in 3rd place in the Constructors. Very much a renaissance for Ken Tyrrell's team in their new blue and white colours. That is Parc Fermé. John, just explain what will go on now, because there is post-race scrutineering.
Yes, after the race, all the cars, but particularly the cars in the top 6, will be taken in. They'll be put into a Parc Fermé, and only the officials will be allowed to examine the cars to ensure that there was no one fundamentally was cheating. But sometimes during the course of a race, things happen to cars. A rear wing can move around if a car's been touched, so they check the legality of the car, and if anything is wrong, then of course that car could be excluded from the results. And it's done extremely, very, very closely indeed.
We remember that Brazilian Grand Prix in '82 where you were finally placed 2nd. Piquet and Rosberg both disqualified after this sort of session for being underweight
And I think they were like something like about a couple of kilos or maybe 1 kilo. I mean, a totally insignificant weight, but because the car was underweight, they were excluded.
Rules have to be rules. Still look forward to the San Marino Grand Prix. Do you think that's going to go Ferrari's way? Certainly this win is going to add to the crowd. Nothing spurs on an Italian crowd like a Ferrari win in the previous race.
Well, I would imagine at Imola we're going to see quite a different face to Formula One in 1990 than what we've seen in the first 2 races. Really, the Grand Prix season, I feel, starts when it comes to Europe, the first race being at Imola. Most of the teams are going to take advantage of the 6-week layoff. They're going to go down to Imola to test, they'll go to other circuits to test. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be the 3 top teams that are going to be filling those 3 front row grid positions. The only possibility is on some of the slower circuits such as Monaco, a street track, where the teams like Tyrrell, maybe Benetton, where they've got less of a disadvantage in terms of horsepower, maybe slightly easier to drive. Possibly the tyre factor, the Pirelli tyre, we know works very well on a street racetrack. So those are going to be the equalisers, but certainly in horsepower terms, unless you've got a multi-cylinder engine in 1990, you're going to be really struggling to keep up with the pace of those front 3 running teams.
And of course the Minardi team, they could be good on street sections. Well, we've got the drivers now on the podium.
I'm sure Alain Prost has got the broadest of grins, smiles on his face. I'm sure he's the happiest little Frenchman.
I think we might see Jean-Marie Balestre up there. He enjoys being on the victory rostrum.
Well, we haven't seen him yet, but he may be struggling to get through the Brazilian crowd, and that will be a struggle, I'm sure.
It's horrendous traffic jams getting into the circuit this morning. I suggest there'll be horrendous traffic jams getting out of it too.
I think Brazilian race fans are sort of comparable to Italian race fans when it comes to their support of Formula One motor racing. They are absolutely ecstatic when Senna, Piquet or any of the Brazilian drivers does something that gets them onto the podium in the top 3. But today they're going to be very disappointed. Their man, the man that they came to support, their hometown boy, let them down.
It's a shame we're seeing that from the helicopter. It's nice to look at a close-up of their faces on that podium. Well, there you see the empty track, and there, much better view there. Senna doesn't look too happy about it all.
And Berger looks like he's had fairly hard races. You can see his hair, he's been having to sweat an awful lot. Senna likewise. Prost looks quite fresh. And of course, really from just about half distance, his race was made very much easier by the shunt with Senna and Nakajima.
Well, that's a bit unusual, John. Nobody's presenting the trophy. He's just picked it up and holds it in the air.
Maybe that's something new.
Well, I think that's rather disappointing. In fact, the FISA has banned the use of victory laurels, which I just staggers me. I can't understand why they did this a couple of years ago. I think that's all part of the victory ceremony. But no victory laurels these days. What do you feel about that?
Well, the whole concept of Formula One, what things get done, what things don't get done, old traditions have had to be kicked out. It's Formula One, it's the change. There are reasons behind these decisions. Sometimes they make very little sense to most people, occasionally they make sense to some.
Well, there is Ferrari's team manager, Cesare Fiore, or team director we should call him, the man who masterminded so much of the Lancia rally success. He's got the trophy. Alain Prost gets the handshakes from some fans.
Tired looking Gerhard Berger.
Now they're just going into the unilateral room to do the interviews. Because the next race coming up will be the San Marino Grand Prix, Sunday the 13th of May. Mark that in your diary. That, of course, will be live flag-to-flag coverage on Eurosport. John Watson and myself, Andrew Marriott, will be commentating on that one. Well, there we've seen the Brazilian Grand Prix. Alain Prost, first ever win for Ferrari. Ayrton Senna could have been a hometown victor. But from John and me, it's a big goodbye.
I think there's, the fact that we were not competitive during qualifying is, we can't understand very well. Each time we put qualifying tires on the car, it does not work. But during the whole weekend, when I was with rest tires and half tank, the car was quite good. And it was the case this morning, and during the race, the car was fantastic. Very big understeer when I started, but when I was behind Boutsen, behind some cars, it's always more difficult. But when I was alone, I think my car was maybe the best on the track today. So I think if we have a good chassis coming and a new engine also with a bit more power, if it works well, I think we are going to fight during the whole season with McLaren. But they still have a small advantage at the moment because they have a very strong engine too, and they know the car, they know the engine very well. So they can work maybe a little bit better than us at the moment, but I hope in 1 or 2 races will be the same for us.
We had everything all right. We had a good start, good beginning of the race and good pace. The car was not perfect, but was reasonably good. I was able to beat the same with Gerhard at the beginning. He was a little bit faster, but then he fell back, and then I improved a little bit the pace, and I was opening the gap slowly just to be safe later in the race. We come to a pit stop, and I had a problem with the left rear tire. Somehow we lost more time there. I had a big moment with Patrese under braking as I come out of the pits. He tried to overtake me inside. Luckily I escaped. He lost his car under braking. And then I was between 10 and 14 seconds with Prost and was pretty much under control. The car was good, and I had a good feeling for it. But I came up to Nakajima, I stayed behind him 4 or 5 corners, and when I come up to then eventually take him, he opened the door. When I am just about halfway beside him, he come back without notice. I tried to brake, I avoid touching wheel to wheel, but he took my nose off, and then that was it.
Just the next race coming up will be the San Marino Grand Prix, Sunday the 13th of May, mark that in your diary. That, of course, will be live flag-to-flag coverage on Eurosport. John Watson and myself, Andrew Marriott, will be commentating on that one. Well, there we've seen the Brazilian Grand Prix. Alain Prost, first ever win for Ferrari. Ayrton Senna could have been a hometown victor, but from John and me, it's a big goodbye.
So, after 2 Grand Prix, Ayrton Senna leads the World Championship, but now up into 2nd place his rival Alain Prost. 3rd equal Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi and Thierry Boutsen, and in 6th position Nelson Piquet. In the Constructors' Championship, McLaren 7 points ahead of Ferrari, with Tyrrell in 3rd position, Williams in 4th place, and then Benetton and Brabham 5th and 6th. So, with a Ferrari victory here in Brazil, what is going to happen at the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola in 6 weeks' time? Well, Imola is in Italy, Ferrari's home country.